Hi guys, and welcome to Gentle History for Deep Sleep. Tonight we step into a white, wind-pressed world where a family wagon stands half-buried beneath fresh snow, its canvas roof snapping softly in the dark. You hear oxen shifting beyond the wheel ruts, children breathing beneath quilts, and a kettle giving one faint metallic click as the fire settles lower. You're somewhere along the long western road, far from a proper house, far from a doctor, and very far from anyone who has thoughtfully installed central heating. The snow keeps falling, the trail has vanished, and, to be honest, you probably will not survive this if your grand plan is to sit politely and wait for spring. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you are listening from, along with your local time now. Dim the lights and let the storm draw closer around the wagon. You stand beside a wooden wheel rimmed with ice. Snow presses into the seams of your boots. Each breath stings. Ahead, the trail that seemed obvious yesterday has become a smooth, pale field. No tracks remain, no hoof marks, no friendly ruts pointing west. Your wagon train has stopped because it must. The oxen cannot find firm ground beneath the drifts, and the drivers cannot judge where the trail drops into a creek bed or climbs toward a ridge. One careless push might snap an axle, overturn a wagon, or exhaust the animals before noon. So the wagons gather tightly, each angled against the wind, each family suddenly aware that movement, the great promise of the journey, has ended. During the great overland migration of the 19th century, hundreds of thousands of travellers move west by wagon, especially from the 1840s through the 1860s. Most hope to reach Oregon or California before winter. Inside, space shrinks around you. A typical emigrant wagon carries food, tools, bedding, clothing, spare parts, and the small, stubborn collection of objects a family cannot bear to leave behind. You climb through the rear opening. Your shoulder brushes a coat. Your knee finds a flour sack. A child shifts without waking, wrapped in blankets and wearing nearly every garment available. The canvas overhead glows grey with reflected snow. Frost feathers the inside where warm breath has frozen overnight. The wagon gives a small groan as wind presses against the canvas. Fine snow slips through a seam and dusts the lid of a wooden chest. You rub your hands together, feeling stiff fingers slowly wake, while someone near the front whispers a prayer too softly to follow. Nothing dramatic happens. That is almost worse. The danger arrives quietly, one colder hour at a time. This is the first lesson of being snowbound. The wagon is not a cabin. It is a wooden box with fabric walls, full of hard corners and precious cargo, yet it becomes kitchen, bedroom, nursery, storeroom, sick room, and council chamber. The adults whisper. They count flour sacks. Remember the last patch of poor grass, and wonder whether the next settlement lies 3 days away or 6. One mainstream fact of overland travel is that many emigrants walk beside their wagons rather than ride inside them. The loads are heavy, and saving the draft animals is essential. The wagon is less a carriage than a moving pantry with family papers tucked beneath the bedding. Now everyone sees that pantry as shelter. Blankets come down. Food boxes become seats. The smallest children are placed near the centre, away from the canvas edges where air leaks through every gap. Someone pushes a quilt against the rear opening. Outside, men and older boys stamp paths between wagons, Women check bread tins, coffee, dried fruit, beans, and bacon. A quirky detail from trail life is that emigrants sometimes carried remarkably heavy household treasures, including cast iron stoves, furniture, mirrors, books, and even pianos. Many were abandoned when animals weakened or roads steepened. The trail became an open-air museum of changing priorities. A polished table means very little when the oxen can barely pull. A family Bible, a china cup, or a framed portrait might survive every argument because it carries the feeling of home, trapped in snow. Such objects seem foolish and necessary at once. Memory cannot feed you, naturally, but it may persuade a frightened person to keep going. The children sense more than adults admit. They hear careful voices and notice when supper portions shrink. One asks whether the snow will stop by breakfast. Another says it looks beautiful. Both comments linger in the cold air, and nobody knows quite what answer to give. Historians still argue whether many written trail accounts understate the emotional strain of winter emergencies, since diaries often record practical tasks more readily than fear. A traveller may write that snow fell all day, cattle scattered, and flour was low. The words look calm. Behind them may sit hours of listening to canvas strain and wondering whether a child is warm enough. You step outside again. Wagons rise from the drifts like dim tents. Lantern light glows through canvas in amber patches. Somewhere a baby cries, then quiets. Somewhere an axe strikes frozen wood with a clean ringing note. Beyond the camp, oxen stand close together, snow gathering along their backs. These families are not helpless. They know how to mend harness, bake over coals, judge weather, ford rivers, and calm frightened animals. Many have crossed hundreds of miles. They have endured dust, heat, sickness, broken wheels, and endless walking. But snow creates a different danger because it steals both motion and certainty. You do not know how long the trail will remain closed. You do not know whether the storm covers one valley or the whole pass. Survival begins by admitting what you cannot know, then turning toward what can still be done. A mother shakes ice from a blanket. A father checks the wagon tongue for cracks. A girl carries warm water to an older man nearby. Train leaders gather beside a low fire, their faces older in the smoke. They speak about fuel, food, livestock, and moving downhill if the weather clears. For tonight, the decision is simple. Stay close. Keep the children dry. Keep the animals from wandering. Protect the fire. Waste nothing. You return to the wagon and draw the canvas flap nearly shut. Cold slips around boots and boxes, settling into the folds of bedding, yet beneath the quilts, surrounded by tired breathing and the soft creak of wood, you feel the first fragile shape of a plan. The wagon was built to carry a family west. Now it must hold that family still while snow rises around the wheels and every ordinary object inside becomes shelter, fuel, food, or hope. The wagon creaks beneath you as the wind leans harder against the canvas, and with every small movement you begin to understand just how poorly this narrow wooden shelter was designed for a long winter pause. It was built to move. That is the uncomfortable truth. The broad wooden bed beneath your knees is meant to carry barrels, sacks, tools, bedding, and the belongings of a family crossing thousands of miles. The curved canvas above is meant to keep off sun, rain, and some dust. It is not meant to trap heat through a night of deep snow. It is not meant to hold 5 or 6 people who must eat. sleep, dress, argue, worry, and somehow remain fond of one another in a space smaller than many modern bathrooms. You shift carefully between a flower chest and a rolled mattress. The wagon floor is hard beneath a thin layer of blankets. Every object seems to possess a sharp edge, a loose handle, or a mysterious talent for being exactly where your foot needs to go. Near the front rests a wooden box filled with tools. Beside it sit cooking pots blackened by weeks of smoke. Clothing hangs from pegs and lines, stiff with cold. A sack of cornmeal is wedged beneath a bench. Spare rope coils beside a water keg. A rifle may rest along one wall, wrapped against dampness, while smaller valuables remain hidden inside trunks or beneath bedding. Nothing is placed casually, space is too precious for that. A family learns the wagon interior by touch, in darkness. You know which chest holds food, which bundle contains spare socks, and which floorboard creaks when someone turns in sleep. You know where the tin cup hangs because it taps against the wall whenever the wagon shifts. You know where the sewing basket sits because you have already found its needles with your hand once, which is quite enough education for any evening. A common historical fact is that many wagons used on the Oregon Trail were lighter farm wagons rather than the enormous freight wagons often shown in popular films. Emigrant families needed vehicles that could be repaired on the road and pulled by teams that were already working near their limits. The wagon bed might be only a few feet wide and perhaps 10 or 11 feet long. Once supplies are loaded, the living space becomes even tighter during ordinary travel. This matters less because adults and older children spend much of the day walking beside the wagon. At night, many sleep outside beneath blankets or simple tents. Now the snow changes everything. The ground is wet, frozen, and exposed. Wind cuts across the camp. The wagon, cramped as it is, becomes the driest and safest place available. People who normally sleep beneath the stars must squeeze inside or shelter beneath the wagon bed. You watch as the family rearranges its world. A small crate is emptied and turned into a seat. Bedding is rolled during the day and spread at night. Food sacks are pushed toward the center so they do not become damp near the canvas. Boots are placed carefully by the rear opening, where they freeze into stiff shapes before morning. The wagon cover arches above you on wooden boughs. The canvas smells faintly of dust, smoke, damp wool, and old rain in warmer weather. The cover provides shade and allows air to pass through. In snow, that same breathability becomes the problem. Cold air slips through the weave. Moisture from cooking and breathing gathers inside. Frost forms above sleeping faces, then melts when the air briefly warms. A few drops fall onto a blanket. Someone sighs. The child beneath it does not wake. There is no proper chimney, so any indoor flame demands great caution. Most cooking still happens outside when weather permits, even if the cook must crouch behind a wheel or build a small windbreak. A brazier or pan of coals might offer brief warmth, but smoke and dangerous fumes make the enclosed wagon risky. Modern people often imagine survival as a contest against cold alone, yet inside the wagon, moisture is nearly as troublesome. Damp blankets lose warmth. Wet clothing chills the body. Condensation creeps into food sacks and wooden boxes. Every breath adds water to the air, and every cooking pot releases more. You cannot simply seal the wagon completely. You need some ventilation. This means choosing between cold air and stale air, which is not the sort of luxury decision anyone hopes to make after breakfast. A curious trail detail is that some wagon covers were treated with oils, paint, or other mixtures to resist rain, though methods varied widely and could leave the canvas with a strong smell. A newly treated cover might repel water better, but it could also make the wagon feel like a cramped tent wrapped in a workshop rag. Historians continue to debate how consistently emigrant wagons were modified for sleeping, since surviving descriptions differ from one family to another. Some travellers describe organised interiors with fitted compartments and careful storage. Others suggest a daily puzzle of shifting boxes, bedding, and supplies. Your family seems to belong somewhere in between. There is a plan. Certainly. It is simply a plan that must be rebuilt every evening. At dusk, the cooking things come in, bedding comes down. Children are fitted into narrow gaps between adults. The smallest child may sleep in a box or basket padded with cloth. An older child curls near the front, feet tucked beside a barrel. Parents sleep closest to the openings. Where drafts are strongest, privacy almost disappears. Every cough, whisper, and restless turn belongs to everyone. Clothing changes happen beneath blankets or behind a hanging quilt. Personal worries become difficult to hide because another face is always only a few inches away. The wagon also has hidden spaces. Food may be packed beneath a false floor or in compartments along the sides. Tools can be lashed beneath the wagon bed. Buckets hang outside. Spare axle grease sits where it can be reached quickly. Some families attach small chests to the rear or suspend objects from hooks. Though every addition affects balance and weight, weight is always watching you. Too much cargo exhausts the animals. Poor balance strains wheels and axles. In ordinary conditions, an overloaded wagon may sink into mud or struggle up a slope. In snow, the problem becomes even more severe. Every unnecessary item feels like an argument with the oxen. You look around at what remains: a chair with one cracked rung, a stack of books, a brass candlestick, a heavy pot that someone insisted would be useful. Each object carries a story, but each also has a weight. Families on the trail sometimes abandon possessions when the road becomes difficult. Snowbound travellers may begin to see the wagon contents differently. Furniture becomes firewood, cloth becomes insulation, a chest becomes a table, a curtain becomes a door covering. Objects lose their old purpose and take on new ones. This transformation is quiet but important. The wagon is no longer merely packed, it is being adapted. A blanket is pinned along the windward side. Spare clothing fills gaps near the floor. A board is laid across two crates to create a narrow sleeping platform. The food most vulnerable to dampness is moved upward. A kettle is wrapped in cloth so it will not wake everyone by knocking against the wall. You run your hand along the rough wooden sideboard. The grain is cold and splintered. Outside, snow presses higher against the wheels. The wagon settles slightly with a tired wooden groan. It is still a poor house. It has no stove, no glass windows, no real door, and almost no room, yet inside it. A family begins to create order, and order, in a storm, can feel very much like warmth. Outside the wagon, the storm leaves no room for careless choices, and the shape of the camp now matters almost as much as the food packed inside it. You step down into snow that reaches above your ankles and immediately feel the wind searching for every opening in your clothing. It comes across the open ground with a dry hiss, lifting loose powder and driving it against the wagon wheels. The cold presses through wool, leather, and determination alike. Before the storm grows worse, the wagon train must decide where to remain. This decision is not simple. A low valley may offer protection from the wind, but it may also collect deeper snow. A ridge may provide a clearer view, yet leave every wagon exposed. A grove of trees promises fuel and shelter, though falling branches can become dangerous under heavy ice. A creek offers water, but its banks may flood when the thaw comes. You stand with the others and study the land while there is still enough light to see. The trail curves toward a shallow rise. Beyond it lies a cluster of cottonwoods, their bare branches rattling softly. A creek runs nearby beneath the skin of ice. The ground between the trees appears uneven but firm. Snow gathers there in soft pockets rather than racing across the surface in sheets. The wagon master points toward the grove. Some agree at once, others hesitate. To leave the open trail means steering heavy wagons through snow without knowing what lies beneath. A hidden hole could break a wheel. A frozen stump could damage an axle. Yet staying exposed may allow the wind to strip warmth from animals and people all night. A mainstream historical fact is that wagon trains often formed temporary camps near water and grazing when possible, since livestock needed both every day. The familiar circle of wagons was not always used. Despite its powerful place in popular imagination, wagons might be arranged according to terrain, convenience, and the need to protect animals. Here, there is no perfect circle. The snow will not allow it. Instead, drivers angle the wagons in a loose line with their narrow ends facing the strongest wind. This reduces the broad surface exposed to the storm. The heaviest wagons settle near the centre. Families with small children and sick travellers are placed where other wagons can offer some protection. You hear commands carried through the wind: move left, hold the team, watch that wheel. The oxen strain, their breath rising in clouds. Chains tighten, wooden spokes groan. One wagon slides sideways, then catches on firmer ground. Men push at the wheels while women guide children away from the animals. Every few yards feel like a mile. When the first wagon reaches the cottonwoods, relief passes through the group. The trees do not stop the wind completely, but they break its force. Snow falls more gently beneath the branches. The air still bites, yet it no longer strikes with the same sharp violence. One by one, the other wagons follow. Choosing camp before a storm is partly a matter of reading signs. The colour of the sky matters, so does the direction of the wind. Travellers watch how animals behave, whether birds disappear, whether the air grows suddenly still, and whether clouds build over distant ridges. Experienced people learn to notice changes that others dismiss. Still, weather in unfamiliar country can deceive even careful observers. Pale morning may become a white afternoon. A light snowfall may deepen through the night. A pass that looked manageable at noon may become impossible by dusk. Historians still argue whether some winter disasters on western trails resulted mainly from poor judgment, or from weather severe enough to overwhelm any reasonable plan. Diaries often make decisions appear obvious after the outcome is known. In the moment, however, travellers face incomplete information, tired animals, fading daylight, and conflicting advice. You feel that uncertainty now. Should the train have stopped earlier? Should it have pushed farther yesterday? Could a lower route have avoided the storm? No answer warms your hands. A quirky frontier tidbit is that travellers sometimes relied on very local clues, such as smoke from distant fires, the dampness of grass, or the behaviour of cattle, to guess at weather changes. None of these methods is perfectly reliable, But when no forecast arrives conveniently in your pocket, even a nervous ox can seem like a professional meteorologist. The camp begins to take shape. Wagons are placed close enough for families to reach one another without wandering far, yet far enough apart to reduce the risk of fire spreading. The animals are gathered on the sheltered side of the grove, ropes are checked, harnesses removed where possible, so leather does not freeze stiff against tired bodies. A narrow path is trampled between the wagons and the creek. Another leads toward the animals. These paths matter more than they seem. During heavy snow, a camp can become confusing, especially after dark. A person walking only a short distance may lose sight of the lanterns. Wind erases footprints quickly. Familiar objects vanish beneath white drifts. So people mark routes with branches, poles, and strips of cloth. A child is told never to leave the wagon alone. An older boy carries a lantern from one family to another. A woman ties a red scarf to a low branch near the creek path. The colour glows faintly against the snow. Water must remain close, but not too close. The creek bank may be slippery. Thin ice can break under weight. Someone tests the surface with a pole and marks a safer place for drawing water. Nearby trees offer fuel. Though greenwood burns poorly and fallen branches may be buried, men begin searching before the storm deepens, dragging back whatever dry wood they can find. Twigs are stored beneath wagons. Larger pieces are stacked where snow will not cover them completely. You help clear a small space beside the wagon. Snow is shoveled away with boards, pans, and anything broad enough to push it. The ground beneath is hard and uneven. A simple fire pit is prepared where smoke will not blow directly into the canvas. Every task is done with tomorrow in mind. If the snow rises during the night, where will the animals stand if the wind changes? Which wagon becomes exposed if someone falls ill? Can neighbours reach them? The adults speak in low voices, not because they lack fear, but because fear must now share space with planning. Stopping early can feel like surrender. Travellers are eager to make miles. Each delayed day consumes food. Every pause risks arriving later at mountain passes or settlements. There is always pressure to continue while the road still seems possible, but pushing too far can be worse. A wagon trapped on an open slope may have no wood nearby. Animals exhausted by one final climb may not recover. Families scattered along the trail cannot easily share labour or supplies. So the choice to stop becomes an act of discipline. You do not wait until every wheel is buried. You stop while the wagons can still be placed. You gather fuel while hands can still work. You make paths while landmarks remain visible. As evening settles, lanterns glow among the cottonwoods. The wagons stand in a rough sheltering row. Their canvas covers pale beneath gathering snow. The creek murmurs faintly under the ice. Oxen shift in the darkness. Calmer now that the wind is weaker, the camp is not safe, not fully, but it is safer than it was. You climb back into the wagon and look through the opening one last time. Snow falls between the trees in soft, steady curtains. Every decision made before darkness now seems larger, heavier, and more precious. The storm may choose how long you remain here, but the families have chosen where they will face it. By morning, the snow has climbed higher against the wagon wheels, and the canvas above you trembles with every gust. Cold air slips through the seams in thin, persistent threads. It touches your face, creeps beneath blankets, and finds the small hollow between neck and collar. The family wakes slowly, not because anyone has slept well, but because rising means leaving the little warmth gathered beneath quilts, you sit up and watch your breath cloud in the dim light. The wagon cover is pale from within, almost luminous. Frost clings to the wooden bows overhead. Near the rear opening, a line of powder has gathered where the wind pushed snow through the loose canvas flap. The first task is obvious. The wagon must be sealed more carefully, not completely, because people still need air. But every unnecessary gap must be blocked before another night arrives. You begin with blankets. One is hung along the side facing the strongest wind. Another is folded and pressed near the floor, where cold air moves beneath boxes and bedding. A worn shawl is stuffed into the corner where the canvas is pulled away from the wagon frame. The work feels almost domestic. You tuck cloth, tie knots, shift trunks, and smooth bedding. Yet each movement is part of survival. The canvas cover of an emigrant wagon is usually stretched over curved wooden supports and tied securely to the wagon bed. It offers protection from rain and sun, but canvas alone provides little insulation in severe cold. Families facing winter conditions often rely on extra cloth, animal hides, spare clothing, and the shelter of the landscape to improve warmth. You run your hand along the inner wall. The fabric feels stiff, rough, and damp. Outside, someone climbs carefully onto a wheel hub and adjusts the ropes holding the cover. Another person pulls the canvas tighter where wind has loosened it. The ropes creak as they are drawn firm. A loose cover can flap all night. That sound is more than annoying. Constant movement works knots free, tears weakened cloth, and allows snow to enter. A small rip can become a large opening before anyone notices, especially in darkness. So every seam is examined, every tie is checked. A needle passes through thick canvas with difficulty. The person sewing must push hard, using a leather guard against the palm. Fingers quickly grow numb, thread stiffens. The repair is slow, but no one hurries enough to make it careless. You hold the canvas steady while the tear is closed. The needle makes a faint scraping sound. Beyond the wagon, the camp is busy with similar work. Families hang quilts inside their covers. Some stretch hides over exposed sections. Others prop boards against the lower sides of wagons to stop drifting snow. One practical fact often overlooked in popular trail stories is that snow itself can become insulation. When packed carefully around the lower part of a wagon, it blocks wind and reduces drafts. The same principle appears in many cold climate shelters, where trapped air inside snow helps hold warmth. This does not mean you bury the wagon completely. That would be unwise. Openings must remain clear. The canvas roof must not carry too much weight. Paths must be maintained, but a low bank of packed snow around the wheels and wagon bed can create a useful barrier. You step outside with a wooden board and begin pushing snow against the windward side. The surface is powdery at first. Beneath it lies denser snow, heavy enough to shape. You press it into a ridge around the lower boards, careful not to block the entrance. The work warms you briefly. Your shoulders move, your hands ache. Snow gathers on your sleeves and melts near the wrists. Others join in. Children carry smaller loads in pans and buckets. A boy uses a flat piece of crate as a shovel. An older woman directs the shape of the bank with the serious authority of someone arranging furniture in a very cold parlour. The drift rises slowly. Once packed, it dulls the wind. Inside the wagon, the change is slight but real. The air near the floor no longer moves quite so sharply. A candle flame, lit only for a moment, wavers less than before. One unusual detail from overland travel is that families sometimes coated wagon canvas with mixtures intended to repel water. Recipes varied and could involve paint, oil, wax, or other household substances. Some treatments worked better than others, and some left the cover smelling strong enough to make fresh mountain air seem rather attractive. Even treated canvas has limits. Snow melts where warmth touches it. Water creeps along seams. Dampness collects beneath folds. If blankets press directly against wet canvas, they may absorb moisture and become colder. So the family creates layers with small spaces between them. A quilt hangs from a rope rather than lying flat against the cover. A hide is tied outside where it can shed snow. Boxes are moved a few inches away from the wall so air can circulate. These tiny spaces matter. Trapped air can slow heat loss. Damp cloth, by contrast, can pull warmth away from the body. The family may not use scientific language for any of this, but experience teaches quickly. Researchers continue to disagree about how widespread advanced winter adaptations were among ordinary emigrant families, because accounts often mention storms without describing every practical adjustment. One diary may simply say that Wagons was covered and camp made secure. Another provides careful notes about blankets, boards, snow walls, and the endless work of keeping bedding dry. The silence of a record does not mean the work never happened. It may only mean the writer was too tired to explain how many times a frozen knot had to be retied. By afternoon, the wagon has changed. The inside feels darker because quilts cover part of the canvas. The air smells more strongly of wool, smoke, leather, and human breath. The space seems smaller, yet also calmer. Sound changes too. Wind no longer snaps directly against the canvas. It reaches you as a softer pressure. A low rushing voice beyond layers of cloth. Snow brushes the outer cover with a whispering sound. The family tests the rear flap. A blanket is hung across it as an inner curtain. The canvas remains the outer barrier. Between them lies a narrow pocket of air. Each time someone enters. Both coverings must be managed carefully. Open one, step through, close it, open the next, close it again. A child forgets and leaves the blanket hanging aside. 3 adults notice at once. No one needs to explain the lesson twice. Near the front of the wagon, a small gap is deliberately left for ventilation. It is protected from direct wind but not sealed. The temptation to close every opening is strong, especially when cold bites at noses and fingers. Yet a crowded wagon fills quickly with moisture and stale air. If coals are brought inside, the risk becomes greater. Warmth without fresh air can become dangerous. This balance is constant. You block the wind, but not the breath. You hold warmth, but not smoke. You keep out snow, but allow damp air to escape. As evening approaches, the packed bank around the wagon turns firm. A thin crust forms over it. The trees continue to sway, and loose snow moves through the camp in silver ribbons. Inside, the children settle beneath layered quilts. Their sleeping places are arranged closer together. Spare clothing is spread beneath them to soften the floor and provide another barrier against cold. A fur robe, if the family owns one, is placed where it will protect the smallest bodies. The wagon remains cold. No one pretends otherwise. But now the cold enters more slowly. You lie down and listen. There is the breathing of the family, the faint creak of wood, the muffled wind, a soft patter of snow falling from a branch onto the canvas roof. The shelter has not become comfortable. It has become deliberate. Every blanket, rope, board, and handful of packed snow now has a purpose. The wagon stands in the storm not as it was built, but as the family has remade it, one careful layer at a time. By late afternoon, the cold has settled into every board, rope, blanket, and bone, and the small fire outside the wagon has become the centre of the camp. You crouch near it with your hands extended, palms facing the weak orange glow. The flames do not leap. They cling. They lick at the edges of damp wood, withdraw, then return as if reconsidering the effort. Smoke drifts low beneath the trees. It smells of wet bark, old ashes, and wool singed by someone who has leaned too close. Around you, other families tend their own fires or share one between several wagons. The storm has made fuel precious. Every branch has value now. A stick that would once have been ignored is carried back, dried, broken, and saved. Warmth must be managed with the same care as flour. The fire gives heat, light, cooked food, melted water, and a small sense of order. It also consumes fuel constantly. Feed it too freely, and the wood pile disappears before the weather changes. Feed it too little, and the flame dies during the coldest part of the night. You learn to watch the coals. Bright coals are more useful than tall flames. They hold heat steadily and can be covered with ash to survive longer. A careful cook draws them together, places smaller wood across them, and shields the fire from sudden gusts. The fire pit has been dug slightly below the surface of the ground. Stones stand around it where stones can be found. Boards and packed snow form a low barrier on the windward side. The smoke still finds your eyes. It always does. You blink through tears while someone remarks that at least crying keeps the face warm. Frontier wisdom is occasionally just discomfort wearing a confident expression. A well-known reality of overland travel is that wood was not always available on broad plains. Emigrants often burned dried animal dung, especially buffalo chips, because it was abundant, portable, and capable of producing a usable cooking fire. The name sounds unpromising. The fuel itself is surprisingly practical, dried thoroughly by sun and wind. Buffalo chips burn with less smoke than fresh dung and can heat a kettle or skillet. Travellers gather them in sacks, aprons, buckets, and even wagon covers spread on the ground. Children often help. To a modern listener, sending a child to collect dried dung may sound like an unusually severe household chore. On the trail, it is simply part of dinner preparation. Here near the cottonwoods, the families have some wood, but not enough to waste. Fallen limbs are buried beneath snow, green branches burn poorly, dead trees may be frozen solid, and chopping them demands strength that must be saved for other tasks. You follow two others into the grove. Each step breaks through the crust with a soft crunch. Snow drops from branches onto your shoulders. The air is so cold that the axe handle feels like iron. You search for wood that is dry beneath the bark. Small twigs snap cleanly and go into a sack. Thicker branches must be dragged. Pieces of bark are gathered for kindling. Pine resin, if found, is treasured because it catches easily and burns hot. The party does not wander far. The camp must remain visible. A length of cloth tied to a tree marks the return route. Beyond it, the woods blur into white shadow. The axe falls with a dull, steady rhythm. Each strike sends a tremor through frozen wood. Chips scatter across the snow. Breath rises from the workers in pale clouds. No one talks much. Talking wastes breath, and the sound of chopping already says what must be said. Back in camp. The fuel is sorted. Dry twigs are kept beneath a wagon. Larger pieces are stacked off the ground. Damp wood rests near the fire so its surface can dry before burning. Nothing is thrown casually into the flames. Even broken wagon parts are examined. A damaged crate can become kindling. A cracked chair rung can burn. A useless shelf may provide an hour of heat. Families begin to look at possessions with colder eyes. That elegant table leg carried from Missouri is suddenly not a memory of home. It is fuel. A peculiar detail recorded in various frontier settings is that travellers sometimes burned abandoned furniture, wagon fragments, and even parts of their own vehicles when conditions became desperate. The distinction between household object and firewood could vanish quickly once survival took command. The wagon itself must be protected. Of course, burn too much of it. And there will be no vehicle when the snow clears, so only broken, unnecessary, or replaceable pieces are sacrificed first. This creates quiet arguments. One person sees a chest with sentimental value. Another sees dry boards, one sees a keepsake, another sees breakfast. Families negotiate these choices in low voices, because shouting does not create more wood. The cook sets a pot over the coals, inside. Beans soften slowly with the strip of bacon. The smell spreads through camp, thin but comforting. It mixes with smoke and frozen air. A second kettle holds snow for water. The cook must decide which task comes first. Food, water, warmth, all require heat. This is why a fire cannot simply blaze for comfort. Every coal has work to do. People warm their hands while stirring supper. Socks are held near the heat, but not too near. Wet mittens are turned slowly. A blanket edge is dried with careful attention. One spark lands on wool. A hand slaps it out at once. Fire is essential, but it is also dangerous. Canvas burns, dry blankets burn, straw burns. A gust can lift sparks toward a wagon cover. For this reason, fires are kept at a measured distance, even when everyone wishes they were closer. Some travellers use metal stoves, especially small sheet iron models, though such equipment adds weight and requires a safe way to vent smoke. In a stranded camp, a stove can be valuable, but only if fuel is available and the wagon can accommodate it without turning into a very cramped smokehouse. Researchers remain divided over how often emigrant families relied on indoor heating during sudden snow emergencies. Written accounts suggest many preferred outdoor cooking fires, while others improvised with stoves, heated stones, or pans of coals. The risks of smoke and invisible fumes were not always fully understood, but the danger of a burning wagon was obvious enough. You watch as several stones are placed near the fire. When warmed, they may be wrapped in cloth and carried near bedding. They cannot heat the whole wagon, but they can take the edge from frozen feet. The stones must be chosen carefully. Some wet stones crack when heated. No one wants a stone exploding beside supper. A hot brick, if the family carries one, is safer and can be wrapped before being placed beneath a blanket. By evening, the fuel pile looks smaller than anyone likes. The leaders speak again. Gathering parties will go out early if the storm allows. Fires will be shared where practical. Cooking will be coordinated so several pots can use the same bed of coals. The camp is learning economy. One strong fire may serve 3 families better than 3 weak ones. This cooperation brings people close together. News passes around the flames. Someone has extra kindling. Someone else has a better axe. Another family offers a handful of dry shavings saved from a repair. Small gifts become important. A twist of paper, a strip of bark, a spoonful of grease to help a flame catch. Darkness settles before the cooking is finished. Lanterns glow beside wagon doors. Snow reflects the firelight in soft amber patches. Faces appear and disappear behind smoke. You hold a cup of hot broth between both hands. The heat reaches your fingers first, then your mouth, then your chest. There's not enough to warm you fully, but it reminds the body what warmth feels like. The fire is covered before sleep. Coals are drawn together and buried beneath ash. A few thick pieces of wood are arranged to smoulder slowly. Someone will check them later. No one trusts the night completely. You return to the wagon carrying a wrapped stone and the smell of smoke in your clothes. Behind you, the flames sink lower, guarded by a final ring of watchers. The camp has little fuel, yet it has not lost fire. And for now, that small red heart continues to beat beneath the snow-filled dark. The wrapped stone at your feet gives off a fading warmth. And for a little while the blankets seem almost kind. You lie pressed between two sleeping bodies, one small and restless, the other heavy with exhaustion. The wagon is dark except for a pale seam of moonlight near the canvas flap. Every breath makes the air feel warmer for a moment, then colder as moisture settles against cloth and wood. No one has much room to turn. A shoulder rests against a flour sack. A bent knee touches the side of a chest. Boots sit near the entrance, stiffening in the cold. Somewhere near your head, a tin spoon taps softly against a cup whenever the wagon shifts. Sleeping inside a snowbound wagon is less a matter of comfort than arrangement. The family begins by deciding who needs the warmest place. Young children settle near the centre, surrounded by older bodies. A sick traveller lies away from the draft if space allows. Adults take the edges, where cold enters near the canvas and floorboards. Anyone who must rise during the night sleeps close to the opening, though that position comes with the privilege of receiving every gust personally. Bedding is layered beneath as well as above. This matters because the wooden floor pulls warmth from the body. Blankets, spare clothing, sacks, and even flattened pieces of canvas are spread below the sleepers. A feather bed, if the family has managed to keep one, becomes one of the most valuable objects in the wagon. Wool blankets lie on top. Quilts fill gaps. Coats cover feet. Nothing soft remains unused. One established feature of 19th century trail travel is that emigrants commonly carried quilts, blankets, and feather bedding from home. These objects served practical purposes, but they also carried familiar patterns, smells, and family memories into unfamiliar country. Now a quilt made years earlier by a grandmother lies across 3 children at once. Its faded squares cannot stop the storm, yet they soften the hard interior and bring a little colour into the grey night. You tuck the edge beneath a child's shoulder. The child murmurs but does not wake. Shared body heat becomes essential. People sleep close enough that warmth moves from one person to another. This closeness can feel comforting, though it also means every cough, twitch, and cold foot becomes a family event. A modern sleeper might complain about sharing a bed. Here, personal space has quietly left the wagon and is probably freezing outside. Clothing stays on through the night. You wear a wool shirt, trousers, stockings, and perhaps a coat beneath the blankets. A cap covers your head. A scarf may wrap loosely around the neck. Mittens remain nearby, ready for the moment when someone must leave the bedding. The challenge is to stay warm without becoming damp. Too many layers can cause sweating during sleep, especially when several people share heat. Damp cloth chills quickly once the body cools, so garments are adjusted carefully. Wet outer clothing is removed when possible and placed near the foot of the bedding, where it may freeze but will not soak the blankets. Before lying down, everyone checks hands and feet. Toes are rubbed, fingers are flexed. Pale or numb skin receives immediate attention. A person who says nothing may be watched closely, since cold can make thought slow and judgment poor. The family has learned that shivering is useful at first. It is the body working to create heat. When a very cold person stops shivering without becoming warm, the silence may signal danger. They do not use modern medical terms, they use observation. Is the child answering clearly? Can the older man move his fingers? Does the woman near the door seem unusually sleepy? Simple questions become quiet tests. A curious practice found in many cold weather traditions involves warming bedding with heated stones, bricks, or metal pans filled with coals along the trail. A safely heated brick wrapped in cloth could offer relief to cold feet, though care was needed to prevent burns, sparks, or scorched blankets. The stone near you is checked before being pushed closer. It feels warm, not hot. A child places both feet against it and sighs with such satisfaction that someone whispers that royalty has demanded a second stone. The joke is small, it still helps. Night routines form quickly. Before darkness deepens, water is brought close enough to reach. A chamber pot or bucket is placed where it can be used without stepping into the storm. The canvas flap is secured. A final check is made of the fire outside. One adult stays awake later than the others. Another agrees to wake before dawn. These watches are not always formal, but someone must listen for changes. The animals may break loose. Snow may collect heavily on the wagon cover. A child may become feverish. Wind may shift and drive smoke toward the camp. You hear all of it through the night. The low moan of branches, the soft thud of snow falling from the canvas, the distant call of a frightened ox, the murmur of another family beyond the wagon wall. Sleep comes in pieces. You drift, wake, listen, then drift again. Researchers disagree about how often entire families slept inside wagons during severe weather. Since arrangements varied with wagon size, family numbers, tents, and local conditions. Some accounts describe crowded interiors, while others mention people sleeping beneath wagons, in tents, or beside fires even during cold spells. In this storm, most people choose enclosure. A few men sleep beneath the wagon bed. Protected by blankets and boards on the windward side, their position is miserable but useful, since it leaves more space inside for children and weaker travellers. Snow piles near them through the night. They wake often to clear it. The family inside must also manage breathing space. The small ventilation gap remains open near the front. Cold enters through it, but so does fresh air. With several people packed together, the wagon soon fills with warm breath and dampness. Frost grows along the canvas. By morning, it may glitter like a thin field of stars, for now the darkness hides it. A child wakes and asks for water. The cup is passed carefully. The water is painfully cold, so only a little is given. Then the child is tucked back beneath the quilts, feet pressed between warmer legs. Someone begins telling a story in a whisper. It is not a grand tale. It is about a kitchen back home, a cat that stole cream, and a neighbour who believed every rooster crowed specifically to annoy him. The children listen. The adults do too. Memory can create a room larger than the wagon. For a few minutes, You smell imaginary bread instead of damp wool. You hear a screen door rather than wind. You picture sunlight on a table. Then the story ends, and the storm returns to your ears, still. The mood has changed. Fear has loosened slightly. Sleeping close is not only about heat, it is also about reassurance. A hand rests on a child's back. A parent listens to breathing. An older sibling wakes whenever the youngest moves. No one sleeps alone with worry. Toward midnight, the wind strengthens, the wagon rocks gently, a rope outside creaks under strain, the adult nearest the opening rises, pulls on frozen boots, and slips through the inner blanket curtain. Cold rushes briefly into the wagon. Everyone feels it. No one complains. The rope is tightened. Snow is brushed from the cover. The adult returns with ice on the shoulders and fingers too stiff to manage buttons. Hands reach from the blankets. They rub warmth back into those fingers. Space opens. The cold traveller settles again. Bodies press close. The wagon grows quiet. You lie awake for a final moment, listening to the shared breathing around you. It rises and falls in different rhythms, yet together it sounds almost like one sleeping creature. Outside, the snow continues. Inside, warmth survives not as comfort, but as something passed from body to body, blanket to blanket, hand to hand. Morning arrives as a grey pressure against the canvas, and hunger wakes before anyone speaks. The smell of last night's broth still lingers faintly in the wagon, mixed with damp wool, smoke, and the sour edge of cold breath trapped too long in a small space. Beneath the blankets, stomachs tighten. A child asks when breakfast will be ready. And the adults pause for just a moment too long. Food is no longer simply food, it is time. Every sack of flour represents another day. Every strip of bacon is a decision. Every spoonful of sugar carries the dangerous temptation to make the present easier at the expense of the future. You climb from the bedding and help bring out the provisions. The flour sack is lighter than it was yesterday. The beanbag folds more easily. The bacon slab has narrowed to a hard, salty strip. Someone sets the food on a crate and begins counting. The calculation is quiet. How many people? How many meals? How long might the trail remain blocked? No one knows the final number, so the family prepares for the worse one. Rations shrink before supplies become desperate. That is the painful wisdom of it. Waiting until the last sack is nearly empty would feel kinder today, but crueler later. A familiar truth of overland migration is that flour, bacon, beans, coffee, sugar, salt, and dried fruit formed the heart of many emigrant food stores. Families selected foods that travelled well, offered energy, and could be prepared with simple equipment. Fresh food rarely lasts long. Milk depends on animals still producing it. Eggs are fragile. Vegetables spoil or freeze. Game may be scarce, especially in deep snow. So the family turns again to the plain staples packed months earlier. Flour can become bread, biscuits, dumplings, or a thick porridge. Beans can stretch across several meals. Bacon provides fat and flavour, even when the portion is small. Coffee offers comfort, though it may soon become too precious for daily use. You watch as flour is measured into a bowl. The cook does not pour freely. A cup goes in, then another half cup. The sack is tied at once. Nothing remains open longer than necessary because dampness, mice, spilled snow, and careless hands all have appetites of their own. The breakfast is a thin flour porridge. Water is heated over shared coals. A little salt is added. A spoonful of grease melts across the surface, giving it a faint shine. The smell is plain but welcome. Bowls are passed. Children receive theirs first. The adults notice who eats quickly and who saves a little at the edge. One person scrapes the pot clean with a piece of bread no thicker than a folded cloth. There are no leftovers. A rather odd trail habit appears in accounts of travellers saving bacon grease with great care. Fat could flavour beans. Beans enrich bread, help fry cakes, protect metal, and sometimes even assist with practical household tasks. In a stranded camp, a small jar of grease may be treated with the respect modern people reserve for an emergency battery. Waste becomes almost offensive. Crumbs are gathered. Water used to rinse a pot may be added to soup. Burned pieces are scraped rather than thrown away. Hard bread is softened in hot liquid. Even coffee grounds might be used a second time, producing a drink so weak that it is more memory than beverage. Someone jokes that the coffee has become acquainted with the water, but is not committed to a serious relationship. The laughter is brief. Still, it helps the cup go down. Rationing changes the rhythm of the day. People speak less about what they would like and more about what can be spared. Meals become slower, not because there is more to eat, but because everyone wants the small portion to last. You chew carefully. You notice texture, the graininess of porridge, the sharp salt of bacon, the warmth of the bowl against your fingers. Hunger makes simple food vivid. It also affects tempers. A tired child cries over a portion that seems unfair. An adult snaps at someone for dropping a spoon. Two people argue about whether a second pot of beans should be started. The argument is not truly about beans. It is about fear. Hunger narrows patience. It makes every choice feel personal. A person who takes one extra bite may seem to be stealing from tomorrow. The family must create rules. Meals are measured by one person. Children are watched so they do not secretly eat from open sacks. Food is stored out of immediate reach, but close enough to protect. No one visits another wagon with empty hands and casually asks what is cooking. Camp leaders begin comparing stores. Some families packed generously and still have several sacks. Others began the journey with less or lost supplies during river crossings and earlier delays. A wagon train may survive only if those with more share with those who have less. But sharing creates difficult questions. How much can one family give without endangering its own children? Should food be pooled? Should every household remain responsible for itself? Specialists continue to dispute how often stranded wagon companies adopted fully shared ration systems, since records reveal everything from remarkable generosity to guarded private stores. Much depended on leadership, trust, length of delay, and the severity of need. In this camp, the first step is modest. Each family reports what it can spare. The numbers not announced loudly. Pride matters. So does suspicion. One household offers beans, another offers salt. A third has more flour but little meat. Several agree to cook together, allowing one fire and one pot to serve many people. This creates a larger stew. It is still thin, but the combined ingredients give it flavour. Beans soften beside bits of bacon. Flour thickens the broth. A few pieces of dried apple are added, which sounds questionable until hunger makes it seem inventive. Children gather near the pot. The cook tells them that staring will not make it boil faster. They continue staring. The adults quietly reduce their own portions. This happens often without announcement. A mother says she's not hungry. A father claims he ate while working. An older sister leaves half her bread for a younger child. The body knows these claims are false, so does everyone else. Yet the performance allows dignity to remain. Food also becomes medicine. A weak traveller needs warm broth. A nursing mother requires enough to sustain herself. A person working outside in the cold burns more energy than someone resting inside. Equal portions may not always be sensible, but unequal portions can breed resentment. So decisions are explained when possible. The sick receive a little more. Children receive food regularly. Workers take a small amount before gathering wood or clearing snow. No one eats simply because boredom makes the hands restless. That temptation is real. The storm has slowed the day. There are long hours of waiting, mending, listening, and watching the canvas move. At home, a person might wander into a kitchen. Here. The kitchen is a guarded sack beneath a blanket. You begin to understand that rationing is emotional work as much as arithmetic. It asks people to live with uncertainty. It asks them to stop before feeling full. It asks them to believe that restraint today may create survival later. By evening, the communal stew is ready. Steam rises into the cold air. Bowls pass from hand to hand. The serving spoon reaches the bottom of the pot with a scrape. You receive a portion smaller than you hoped and larger than you feared. The first mouthful is hot. The second is smoky. The final one is eaten slowly enough to cool on the spoon. Around the fire, faces soften. For a few minutes, everyone is occupied with warmth and taste. The storm seems farther away, then the bowl's empty, the sacks are tied again. The remaining bacon is wrapped. Flour is returned to the driest place in the wagon. Tomorrow's food waits in darkness, guarded from dampness, animals, hunger, and human weakness. You climb back beneath the canvas with the taste of salt still on your lips. The meal has not filled you. It has carried you forward, and tonight, that is enough. The empty bowls are stacked beside the cooking pot, and before the last warmth fades from your hands, another problem rises quietly in front of you. Water. Snow surrounds the camp in every direction. It covers the wagon roofs, fills the wheel ruts, bends the lower branches, and lies in deep white folds across the frozen ground. At first glance, thirst seems impossible here. Surely water is everywhere. Yet snow is not water until it is melted, and melting it demands fuel, time, containers, and patience. These are precisely the things the camp cannot afford to waste. You lift a wooden bucket and follow the trampled path toward the creek. The morning air pinches the inside of your nose. Each footstep presses a dark hollow into the snow, and the surface squeaks beneath your boots. The creek lies beneath a lid of ice. Someone has already cleared a small working place on the bank. A pole marks the safest approach. Nearby, chopped ice rests in cloudy blocks beside a kettle. The first choice is whether to draw from the creek or melt snow. Creek water is usually more efficient if it can be reached. A bucket of liquid water requires far less fuel than a bucket filled with loose snow, because snow contains so much trapped air. A pot heaped to the rim may melt into only a shallow pool. But reaching the creek carries risks. The bank is slippery, ice may break, water spilled on clothing freezes quickly. A person who falls in may have only minutes to remove wet garments and regain warmth, so no one works alone. One person steadies the rope, another breaks the surface ice. A third waits with a blanket and dry mittens nearby. Because sensible preparation is less exciting than rescue and far more useful. You kneel carefully while a short axe strikes the ice. The sound rings across the grove. Clear chips scatter beneath the white crust. Dark water moves slowly. A bucket is lowered through the opening. It fills with a heavy gulp and bumps against the edge. Two people pull it up together. Liquid water sloshes near the rim. The sight feels strangely luxurious. A dependable reality of trail travel is that wagon companies planned daily camps around water whenever possible. People needed it for drinking and cooking, while oxen, horses, and cattle required far greater amounts. A poor water source could delay an entire company or force it onward despite exhaustion. Now the creek is both gift and danger. The opening must be kept clear through the day. Ice reforms quickly around the edges. Snow blows across the surface. Someone marks the hole with upright branches so that a traveller does not step into it after dark. Buckets are carried back slowly. No one fills them completely. Because spilling even a little means wet boots, frozen skirts, or icy trouser legs. A half-full bucket delivered safely is better than a full one decorating the path. Inside the camp, water is rationed almost as closely as food. People drink first, then comes cooking, then washing if anything remains. Personal cleanliness does not disappear entirely, but it becomes modest. A damp cloth may clean hands and faces. Pots are scraped before they are rinsed. Clothing is not washed unless absolutely necessary, since wet fabric can freeze before it dries. The modern desire for a long hot bath has no place here. At most, you receive a basin, a cloth, and a strong reminder that everyone else in the wagon is equally fragrant. When creek water is difficult to collect, snow must be melted. The cook begins with a little liquid in the bottom of the pot. This prevents the metal from scorching and helps fresh snow collapse more evenly. Then clean snow is added in small amounts. Not all snow is equal. The top layer may contain twigs, ash, animal tracks, or drifting dirt. Snow gathered near the cooking fire tastes of smoke. Snow taken beside the livestock may offer additional flavours that nobody requested. Fresh snow is collected from an undisturbed patch, preferably away from the busiest paths. Children help fill bowls and kettles. They learn not to pack the pot too tightly. They learn to add more only after the first snow shrinks. They also learn that a mountain of snow can become a cup of water with a speed that feels personally insulting. A lesser-known detail from cold weather travel is that people sometimes kept a small amount of water from freezing by storing it near sleeping bodies, wrapping the container in blankets, or placing it inside insulated boxes. The arrangement could be uncomfortable, especially when a poorly sealed bottle shared a bed. But waking beside liquid water was worth considerable inconvenience. Containers themselves create trouble. Water expands when it freezes. A tightly sealed bottle can crack. A wooden bucket may split. A metal vessel can become impossible to handle with bare skin. So lids are loosened. Kegs are not filled to the top. Cups are kept upside down to prevent blowing snow from collecting inside. At night, the family decides which small container must remain accessible. A child may wake thirsty. Someone with fever may need frequent sips. The cook will need water before the fire is strong enough to melt more snow. A covered cup is placed near the bedding, wrapped in cloth. It may form a thin skin of ice by morning, but it should not freeze solid. You take a drink now. The water is cold enough to ache in your teeth. It tastes faintly of smoke and iron from the pot. Still, it eases the dryness in your mouth. Thirst in cold weather can be deceptive. People do not always feel as thirsty as they would under summer heat. Yet the body continues losing water through breath, sweat, and work. Heavy clothing hides perspiration. Dry winter air pulls moisture from every exhalation. The camp leaders remind workers to drink before heading out. A person chopping wood may insist that stopping wastes time. Then the axe grows clumsy, the hands weaken. A cup of warm water becomes part of the work rather than an interruption to it. Some people add a little coffee, dried fruit, or broth to make drinking more appealing. Plain warm water can seem dull, but it enters the body gently and helps restore warmth from within. There is also a dangerous temptation to eat snow. A handful looks clean and effortless. Children especially may scoop it up while playing or walking. A small amount will not doom a healthy person, but relying on snow for hydration forces the body to spend heat melting it. It can cool the mouth and stomach, worsen chilling, and provide much less water than expected. The adults discourage it. Snow is melted first whenever possible. A child caught chewing a lump is told to spit it out. The child obeys with the tragic expression of someone deprived of a great delicacy. Researchers remain divided over how fully 19th century travellers understood the bodily cost of eating snow. Practical warnings appear in various traditions, though explanations were shaped more by experience than by modern physiology. People knew that snow could increase cold and leave thirst unsatisfied. Even when they could not describe the process in scientific terms, fuel remains the central limit. Every pot of melted snow consumes twigs, wood, or dried dung that might otherwise cook food or warm hands. For this reason, several tasks are combined. Water melts while beans simmer. A kettle sits near the fire while bread cooks. Warm stones are heated beside the same coals. Nothing receives a separate flame unless necessity demands it. The cook covers the pot to hold heat. A lid also keeps ash from settling into the water. Though a little ash still finds its way inside, frontier water occasionally arrives with texture. By afternoon, a system has formed. Creek water is collected while daylight is strongest. Snow is melted only to supplement it. Each family receives a measured amount. Extra water is reserved for the sick, the smallest children, and those performing the heaviest labour. The animals remain the greatest concern. Even reduced herds require more water than the people, where possible. Snow is cleared from places where livestock can reach the creek safely. In other cases, animals eat snow, though this offers poor replacement for open water and may leave them weaker. You watch an ox lower its broad head toward a trough. Steam rises from its nostrils. The animal drinks slowly, then lifts its face with water hanging from the muzzle. Within moments, droplets freeze along the hair. That evening, the family returns to the wagon carrying one covered kettle and a small bucket. The supply does not look generous. It is enough for drinking through the night and beginning breakfast. The containers are placed where they cannot be kicked in the dark. Cloth is wrapped around them. Everyone is warned to move carefully. You settle beneath the quilts while the last kettle outside gives a soft metal murmur over the coals. Snow keeps falling beyond the canvas. It is vast, silent, and almost useless until human hands gather it, warm it, guard it, and turn winter itself into one more measured cup. The ox lifts its wet muzzle from the trough, and the frozen droplets along its jaw catch the weak morning light. For a moment, the animal simply stands there, breathing clouds into the air. Then it shifts its weight. That movement draws every nearby eye. A healthy ox should stand firmly, pull steadily, and eat whenever food appears. A weak one lowers its head, hesitates before stepping, or trembles through the shoulders. In ordinary travel, such signs are worrying. In a snowbound camp, they can decide whether the family ever moves again. The wagons depend on these animals. Without them, the road west becomes a line on a map rather than a journey. You approach the team slowly. Their coats are rough with frost. Snow rests along their backs and gathers between their horns. One animal turns toward you, patient but watchful, while another paws at the buried ground. The oxen are hungry. That is the first and greatest problem. During normal days on the trail, cattle graze whenever the company stops. Drivers look for grass near water, and the animals spend hours feeding before being gathered again. Packed fodder is heavy, so emigrants cannot carry enough hay to supply large teams for long periods. Now grass lies beneath snow. The animals smell it. They scrape with their hooves and push their noses into the drifts, trying to uncover the dry stems below, in shallow places. This works. In deeper snow, the effort consumes more energy than the small mouthfuls provide. You help clear a patch with a old board. The snow comes away in slabs, revealing grass flattened against the earth. It is yellow, coarse, and thin, but the oxen bend toward it immediately. Their jaws begin the slow circular motion of chewing. The sound is soft and reassuring. A central fact of the Western wagon migrations is that oxen were often preferred over horses for pulling family wagons. They moved more slowly, but they were generally strong, patient, capable of living on rough forage, and less expensive than many horse teams. Their slow pace suited the walking speed of emigrant families. Their strength suited muddy roads and steep climbs. Yet even sturdy animals have limits. Cold increases their need for food. Pulling through snow exhausts them quickly. Poor grazing weakens muscles. And weakened animals become more vulnerable to sickness and injury. The family must protect strength that cannot easily be replaced. You run a hand along an ox's side, beneath the thick coat. The ribs are easier to feel than they were weeks ago. The journey has already taken weight from the team. The storm now threatens to take the rest. Every scrap of available feed is gathered. Some families carry a little grain for emergencies, though grain is also valuable for people. Brandy corn or oats may be measured into small portions for the weakest animals. Hay tied beneath a wagon might survive if it has remained dry. Corn husks, vegetable peelings, and edible plant scraps are saved. Nothing suitable is discarded. A child appears with a small bundle of dry grass collected from beneath the trees. It looks almost laughably modest beside the broad head of an ox. Still, the animal takes it carefully from the child's hands. That small exchange quiets everyone nearby. There is tenderness in caring for a creature that may later save your life. Shelter matters almost as much as feed. The wagons provide some protection from wind, so animals are gathered on the sheltered side of camp. Ropes run between trees and wagon frames, creating a secure line where teams can be tied. The arrangement must prevent tangling. A frightened animal can pull down equipment, injure another beast, or break loose into the storm. Drivers check knots repeatedly. Leather harness is removed whenever possible. Frozen straps can rub skin raw. Metal fittings become painfully cold. Yokes are inspected for cracks and stored beneath cover, ready for the day when movement returns. The animals themselves are brushed. Snow packed into the coat is swept away. Ice is removed from hooves. Legs are examined for swelling, cuts, or stiffness. A small injury ignored today may make pulling impossible tomorrow. A curious feature of ox handling is that many teams respond to individual names and familiar voices. Drivers often work with the same animals for months, using spoken commands and steady routines. An ox may know when to turn, stop, or move forward from tone alone, which makes the relationship far more personal than the phrase draft animal suggests. You hear those names through the camp: Bright, Buck, Star, Duke. The words are spoken gently now. There is no wagon to pull today, only another cold morning to survive. One ox refuses food. Its head hangs low. A driver rubs the animal's neck and checks its mouth. Another brings warm water with a little meal stirred into it. The mixture gives off a faint grain smell. The ox drinks several swallows, then stops. That is not enough to reassure anyone. People experienced with livestock watch for bloating, laboured breathing, lameness, and exhaustion. Remedies are simple and often uncertain. Rest, warmth, water, rubbing, and adjusted feed are used first. A traveller may carry basic veterinary preparations, but there is no specialist waiting beyond the next tree. Historical researchers remain divided about how many emigrant animals were lost primarily to disease rather than overwork, poor forage, accidents, or harsh weather. Trail records often note that cattle died without giving enough detail to identify one clear cause. For the family, the distinction matters less in the moment. A dead ox cannot pull. A sick ox may recover if given rest. That possibility directs the day. The weakest animal is moved closer to the wagons where wind is lower. A blanket is draped across its back for a short time, though it must remain dry. Snow is cleared beneath its feet. Feed is placed within easy reach, nearby. Horses stamp impatiently. They suffer differently. Horses may move faster, but they often require better forage. Their legs are more vulnerable in broken or icy ground, and frightened horses can waste energy by struggling against ropes. Mules, where present, add their own opinions to camp life. A mule may be strong, clever, and highly resistant to anyone else's schedule. One traveller mutters that the animal has excellent judgment, provided nobody expects it to cooperate. The joke travels between wagons, even now. Animals remain part of camp personality. Chickens may huddle in boxes. A milk cow, if one survives, becomes especially valuable to families with young children. Dogs move beneath wagons, seeking scraps and warmth. Each creature consumes resources, yet each may also contribute food, protection, labour, or companionship. Difficult decisions approach quietly. If feed continues to shrink, which animals receive it? The strongest teams may be essential for moving wagons. The weakest may need extra food to recover. A milk cow may support children. A riding horse may be less necessary than an ox. No choice feels clean. Camp leaders discuss shared grazing areas and feed stores. Families with extra fodder may trade or lend it. Animals are grouped so cleared ground can be used efficiently. People take turns watching them. This guard matters at night. Hungry livestock may chew ropes, wander toward buried grass, or push into supply piles. Predators are another concern. Though weakened animals in severe weather pose the greater immediate danger, you take the early watch. The sky darkens behind the cottonwoods. Snow squeaks beneath the shifting hooves. Bells tied to a few animals give quiet, irregular notes. You walk along the line, touching ropes and speaking softly. The ox that refused food earlier now lowers its head toward the grass. It takes one mouthful, then another. The driver notices but does not celebrate too loudly. Hope, like feed, must be offered carefully. You stand beside the animal and feel warmth rising faintly from its broad body. Its breath moves across your sleeve. Behind you, the wagons wait beneath white covers, silent and heavy. Every family in camp is thinking beyond the storm. They picture thawing ground. They picture wheels turning. They picture the first pull against the yoke. None of that can happen unless these animals remain alive, steady and strong enough to lean forward together. So you clear more snow. You carry another armful of grass. You check one more rope before returning to the wagon. The oxen chew in the darkness, slow and patient, preserving tomorrow one mouthful at a time. The oxen continue chewing beyond the canvas, but inside the wagon a different sound begins to matter. A cough. It comes from the far corner, dry at first, then deeper, followed by a long silence. Everyone listens without appearing to listen. Illness in a snowbound camp never belongs to one person alone. It changes the work of the whole family. Someone must bring water, warm bedding, prepare food, watch through the night, and decide whether the sickness is passing or growing worse. You move closer. The patient lies beneath two quilts, face pale in the dim light. A hand rests on the forehead. The skin feels hot, though the air around it is bitterly cold. Fever creates a cruel confusion. The sick person shivers and asks for more blankets. Later, sweat dampens the shirt and bedding, if those layers remain wet. The cold may become even more dangerous, so the family watches carefully. A dry cloth replaces a damp one. Warm water is offered in small amounts. The bedding is lifted briefly to allow moisture to escape, then settled again before the patient loses too much heat. There is no thermometer. There is only touch, observation, and memory. Does the face look more flushed than yesterday? Is breathing fast? Can the patient answer clearly? Has any food stayed down? Questions like these guide the family more than numbers ever could. A widely recognized reality of overland travel is that disease caused more death than attacks or dramatic accidents. Cholera, dysentery, measles, respiratory infections, and other illnesses travelled with emigrant companies, often spreading quickly where people shared water, camps, and close quarters. Snow changes the pattern, but not the danger. Cold weather may slow some contamination, yet crowded wagons bring coughing faces close together. Privacy disappears. Fresh air is limited. Bedding is shared. One sick child can expose an entire family before anyone realizes what has begun. The ventilation gap remains open despite the cold. This feels unreasonable when wind presses through it. Still, stale air and smoke make illness worse. You resist the urge to seal every opening. Outside, a small fire heats water for washing cloths and preparing broth. The flames burn low to conserve fuel. A spoonful of flour thickens the liquid. A little salt is added. If dried herbs remain, they may be used more for comfort than certainty. Home remedies travel west beside tools and food. Families carry knowledge passed through generations. Willow bark may be used for pain. Peppermint or sage may soothe the stomach. Mustard preparations may be placed against the chest. Camphor, turpentine, laudanum, or patent medicines might appear in a medicine box. though their usefulness varies and their risks are not always understood. One strange feature of 19th century medicine is the confidence inspired by bottled remedies with impressive labels. A mixture might promise relief for coughs, weakness, stomach trouble, nervous complaints, and nearly every inconvenience except perhaps being trapped in snow. The bottle may contain alcohol, opium, or ingredients described so vaguely that mystery itself seems medicinal. The family studies one such bottle. The dose is measured cautiously. No one is certain whether it helps. The patient sleeps afterward, which may be seen as improvement even when the medicine is responsible for the drowsiness. You continue watching. Sleep can heal. It can also hide decline. The family wakes the patient gently from time to time, asking for a name, a place, a sip of water nearby. Another traveller struggles with frost-damaged fingers. The skin is pale and numb. Rubbing with snow, a method sometimes recommended in earlier times, can cause further injury. Instead, the hands are warmed gradually beneath clothing and against another person's body. Warmth must return slowly, not beside fierce flames, not in hot water. Feeling comes back with pain, a sharp, burning ache that makes the traveller clench the jaw. The fingers are dried and wrapped loosely. Everyone studies the tips for changes. Darkening skin would suggest more serious damage. For now, colour returns unevenly. That is enough for cautious hope. Camp knowledge grows through shared experience. Someone from another wagon has treated a similar injury. An older woman remembers how her father handled frozen feet during a hard winter. A man who once worked near a military post describes what he saw surgeons do. Advice arrives generously. Agreement does not. Researchers continue to question how much practical medical skill emigrants gained from one another during emergencies. Because diaries often record treatments without revealing where the knowledge came from or whether it worked. Some remedies reflect long experience, others reflect custom, desperation, or the persuasive confidence of the loudest person near the fire. You learn to listen. Then choose carefully. Cleanliness matters even when water is scarce. Cloths used by the sick are kept separate where possible. Waste is carried away from the camp and water source. Cups are not shared casually. Hands are wiped before food is prepared. These habits may not be explained through modern ideas of infection, but travellers often understand that filth, bad water, and crowded conditions can spread sickness. The wagon, however, remains crowded. There is nowhere else for the patient to go. A blanket is hung to create a small partition. It offers little protection, but it gives the sick person quiet and the family a sense of order. Beyond the curtain, ordinary tasks continue. Bread must be made, animals must be fed, snow must be cleared, children must be kept occupied. Illness does not stop the camp, it simply adds another weight. The greatest fear arrives when a woman begins labour. Childbirth on the trail may happen beside a river, beneath a tent, or inside a wagon stopped only briefly. In this frozen camp, the wagon becomes a birthing room because there is no better place. The news moves quietly between families. Experienced women gather. Water is heated. Clean cloth is found. Men and older children are sent to tend fires. Animals, and any task that carries them politely elsewhere. The labouring woman breathes through the pain while wind presses against the canvas. The space is narrow. Every object is moved to create room. Blankets are warmed. A lantern burns low. No trained physician may be present, though occasionally a wagon company includes someone with medical experience. More often, birth is guided by women who have attended other deliveries and understand what steady hands can do. The camp waits. Hours pass. Outside, snow falls from the branches with soft, heavy thumps. Inside, voices remain calm. The woman is encouraged to drink. Her back is rubbed. The fire is fed. Then, at last, a newborn cry cuts through the wagon. It is small. It is strong. The sound carries into the cold camp, and people who have been pretending not to listen allow themselves to smile. The child is dried quickly and wrapped in warm cloth. The mother is covered, given broth, and watched for bleeding, fever, and weakness. Birth brings joy, but it also brings new danger. The baby must stay warm. The mother must regain strength. Food, water, and rest become even more important. A cradle may be no more than a padded box placed near the centre of the wagon. The infant sleeps close to the mother's body, protected by quilts and attentive hands. Across camp, the feverish patient wakes and asks for water. The frost-damaged traveller flexes sore fingers. A baby breathes against its mother's chest. These lives occupy the same cold morning. No miracle removes the danger. Care is made from repeated small acts. A cup lifted, a cloth changed, a hand warmed, a pulse felt at the wrist, a child hushed so the sick can sleep. By evening, the cough has softened slightly. The patient takes 3 spoonfuls of broth and keeps them down. No one calls this recovery, but the family notices. The newborn remains warm. The mother rests. The damaged fingers ache, which means feeling survives. Inside the wagon, illness still waits in every breath and damp blanket. Yet so does care, quiet and stubborn, moving from person to person through the narrow space. You settle near the entrance and listen to the night. One cough, one infant sigh, one weary voice asking whether everyone has enough covering. In a place with almost no medicine, survival depends on attention, and attention, tonight, does not sleep. The baby sleeps in the padded box near the centre of the wagon, and beside it a young girl sits with both hands wrapped around a tin cup. She's been told to keep the water from spilling. This sounds simple until the wagon shifts. A younger child reaches for her sleeve, and someone near the entrance asks her to move aside. Still, she holds the cup steady. Her face is serious with concentration. Children in the snowbound camp are not merely waiting for adults to save them. They have work. Some tasks are small enough for little hands, others carry responsibilities that would surprise many modern families. A child may gather twigs, watch a kettle, carry messages between wagons, soothe a baby, brush snow from bedding, or stand beside an animal while an adult adjusts a rope. The work depends on age, strength, weather, and need. A 4-year-old may collect dropped clothespins. An 8-year-old may carry kindling. A 12-year-old may handle an ox nearly as large as a room. No one announces that childhood has ended. The storm simply asks more of everyone. You follow 2 children outside after breakfast. They wear layers that make their movements stiff. Scarves cover their mouths. Mittens are tied to cords so they will not vanish into snow, which is an excellent system until the cord catches on a crate and nearly turns one child around. Their task is to gather fuel near the sheltered side of the grove. They search beneath branches where the snow is thinner. Every dry twig goes into a sack. Pieces too large to carry are marked with a strip of cloth so an adult can return with an axe. The children compete quietly. One finds a branch shaped like a crooked arm. Another discovers bark dry enough to crumble. For a few minutes, the work resembles a game. This is not accidental. Adults often turn chores into contests because children move more willingly when effort has a story attached. Who can fill the sack first? Who can find the straightest stick? Who can carry snow without dropping it? The prize may be nothing more than praise. In this camp, praise is enough. A broadly accepted feature of overland family life is that children performed substantial daily labour. They herded livestock, collected fuel, fetched water, cared for siblings, cooked, cleaned, and helped repair camp equipment. The trail required family cooperation, and even young travellers contributed according to their abilities. Their diaries sometimes describe chores with remarkable calm. A child may write about walking all day, watching cattle, or crossing a dangerous river as if recording ordinary household business. Perhaps it felt ordinary by then. Human beings can become used to almost anything, which is both useful and slightly alarming. Back near the wagons, an older boy helps clear the path to the creek. He pushes snow with a flat board. The work is repetitive. Snow slides back from the edges. Wind erases part of the path almost as soon as it is opened. He keeps going beside him. A younger child stamps the loose snow flat with great enthusiasm and very little accuracy. The older boy corrects him, not sharply. He shows where to step, how to make the path firm, and how to avoid the slippery bank. Children teach one another constantly. Adults are busy, tired, or absent on gathering parties. Older siblings become guards, instructors, and substitute parents. They button coats, divide food, settle arguments, and decide whether a cough sounds serious enough to mention. This responsibility can create pride. It can also create fear. A girl carrying warm water to a sick neighbour knows that spilling it means more fuel must be burned. Her hands shake, partly from cold and partly from importance. She walks slowly. The kettle arrives safely. The neighbour thanks her as if she's delivered treasure. She returns taller, not physically. Of course, snowbound camps do not produce instant growth in that convenient fashion, but her expression changes. She has done something necessary, and everyone knows it. A less familiar detail from immigrant childhood is that children sometimes made toys from scraps found along the journey. Corncob dolls, rag figures, carved animals, pebbles, buttons, and bits of string could become entire worlds when proper toys were packed away or abandoned. Here, play enters through leftovers. A boy carves a tiny wagon from a piece of broken crate. Its wheels do not turn. He pushes it through flour spilled on a board, pretending the pale dust is snow, which feels rather unnecessary given the impressive quantity outside. Two girls make a doll from cloth strips and a spoon. They wrap it in a scrap of quilt and place it beside the newborn's box. A toddler arranges beans in a row until an adult notices that supper is being used as architecture. The beans are collected immediately. Play must respect rationing. Songs also fill the long hours. A mother hums while mending. Children repeat verses they remember from school or church. Someone begins a counting rhyme. Another tells a story about a fox too clever for its own good. The wagon walls soften sound. Voices become close and warm beneath the canvas. Laughter arrives unexpectedly. A mitten falls into porridge. A dog steals a frozen biscuit and discovers it cannot bite through it. A child imitates the wagon master's serious voice so accurately that 3 adults look away to hide smiles. Humor does not remove fear. It gives fear less room. Researchers have reached different conclusions about how deeply children understood the dangers surrounding them. Because surviving accounts vary with age and personality. Some young travelers describe adventure and novelty. Others record death, hunger, and anxiety with painful clarity. Many probably move between both states in the same day. You see that movement now. The children race along the marked path, then stop when an ox stumbles. They laugh over the crooked toy wagon, then grow silent when adults lower their voices. They ask when the snow will melt. They ask whether anyone knows the way home. An adult answers the first question with perhaps. The second is met with a long pause. Homesickness becomes another hidden burden. Children miss familiar beds, cousins, pets, schools, gardens, and the simple knowledge of what lies beyond the next hill. Some left home willingly, excited by Western stories. Others had no choice at all. A small boy remembers an apple tree. He describes it repeatedly. The branch above the roof, the hollow where insects gathered, the sound apples made when they fell at night. His sister tells him that there will be apple trees in Oregon. She says it confidently. Perhaps she believes it. Perhaps she only understands that he needs to hear it. In the afternoon, the adults organize chores more formally. Older children take turns watching younger ones. 2 gather snow from a clean patch. 1 helps measure beans. Another checks that the red scarf marking the creek path remains visible. A boy carries news between wagon leaders. He repeats each message exactly, proud of being trusted. No child goes far alone. Pairs are safer. A whistle or call means return immediately. The edge of camp is marked clearly. These rules are repeated until even the smallest children can say them. Still, accidents wait. 1 child slips near a wagon tongue and lands hard in the snow. Another wanders behind an ox and is pulled away before the animal steps backward. A mitten disappears and must be found before fingers numb. Adults correct, comfort, and continue. There is little space for panic. Toward evening, children help prepare the sleeping places. They shake blankets. They carry in the wrapped stones. They place cups where feet will not kick them. The smallest child is given the important duty of counting spoons. He counts 5. There are 6. He counts again and announces 7. The missing spoon is eventually found beneath a coat. Having wisely avoided responsibility, supper is thin, but the children receive warm portions. Their faces relax as they eat. The day's work has made them hungry and tired. 1 falls asleep before finishing. Another tries to remain awake for the story and loses the struggle halfway through a sentence. You watch them settle beneath quilts, cheeks red from cold, hair smelling of smoke. Their courage does not look like a speech. It looks like carrying a kettle without spilling. It looks like sharing a blanket. It looks like entertaining a frightened sibling while adults make decisions beyond the canvas curtain. Tomorrow they will wake and work again. Tonight they sleep close together, while their small carved wagon waits on a crate beside the lamp, pointed west through the dark. The children sleep beneath their quilts, but the women of the camp remain awake. A kettle must be checked. A damp blanket must be turned. The newborn must be fed. The feverish traveller needs water. Someone has torn a sleeve while gathering wood, and that sleeve must be mended before morning, because cold air is very efficient at finding neglected seams. You sit near the wagon opening and watch a woman thread a needle by lantern light. Her fingers are swollen from cold and work. The thread resists the eye of the needle. She breathes slowly, tries again, and succeeds. There is no applause. There is only another task waiting beside her. Across the camp, women move between fires, wagons, animals, and sick beds. Their labour holds the camp together so thoroughly that much of it becomes almost invisible. Meals appear. Bedding is arranged. Children are calmed. Clothing is repaired. Supplies are counted. Illness is watched. Water is warmed. Tempers are softened before they break into open conflict. None of these tasks is minor. Each prevents a small problem from becoming a dangerous one. A loose button can expose skin. A damp quilt can chill a child. A forgotten pot can waste food. A frightened person can make a reckless decision. The women notice these details because survival is often hidden inside details. One well-established feature of migration along the Oregon Trail is that women performed an enormous share of daily camp labor while also walking much of the route. They cooked, washed, mended, tended children, nursed the sick, gathered fuel and helped manage livestock, often after covering many miles on foot. The labor does not pause because of snow. It becomes heavier. Ordinary work now demands more time and fuel. Water must be carried over ice. Frozen cloth must be thawed before it can be cleaned. Bread must be made from carefully measured flour. Children must remain close without growing restless enough to wander. You follow one woman through her morning. She rises before full light. First, she checks the youngest child. Then she feels the forehead of the sick person. Next, she wraps herself in a coat that is still damp at the cuffs and steps outside to revive the coals. The fire seems dead. She kneels, parts the ash, and finds a faint red glow beneath it. Dry fibres are added, then twigs. She shields the ember with both hands and blows gently. Smoke lifts. A flame appears. This tiny success allows breakfast to begin. While water warms, she measures flour. While porridge thickens, she shakes frost from bedding. While the children eat, she checks the bacon, counts cups, and reminds someone to carry feed to the oxen. She eats last. Her portion is smaller because she's already decided that a growing child needs more. She says she is not very hungry. No one believes her. The statement is accepted anyway. Women often control the household stores, which gives them authority and burden at once. They know how much flour remains, where the dried fruit is hidden, and which child has already eaten. They also know what cannot be replaced. A needle, a spool of thread, a clean cloth for childbirth, a little sugar reserved for illness. These objects may weigh almost nothing, yet their value grows with every day of confinement. A curious detail from emigrant life is that women sometimes carried treasured recipes, fabric patterns, seeds, and household instructions in notebooks or memory. In a crisis, such knowledge could prove more useful than ornamental possessions. Knowing how to stretch sour milk, mend a torn blanket, or turn scraps into a meal was a quiet form of expertise. The women compare methods. One knows how to make a flour paste that seals a small canvas seam until a proper repair can be made. Another shows how to wrap an infant so warmth is held without restricting breathing. A third has experience with swollen joints and prepares a warm cloth. This exchange does not always happen gently. Expertise can produce rivalry. One woman believes the baby is wrapped too tightly. Another thinks the broth is too thin. A third insists that the sick person should be kept warmer. Voices sharpen. Then someone notices that the kettle is boiling over. Practical necessity restores peace faster than diplomacy. Researchers still disagree about how much decision-making power women held within wagon companies. Since formal leadership positions usually belonged to men while household survival often depended heavily on female judgment. Diaries and letters suggest that influence varied greatly among families and companies. Here, authority appears in action rather than title. A woman refuses to allow the wagon to move until a child's fever falls. Another insists that the animals need water before a scouting party departs. A third challenges the ration measure because the nursing mother is weakening. These decisions may not be announced at the council fire, yet they shape what the camp does. Care becomes a form of command. So does organization. One wagon serves as a place for shared sewing and mending during the brightest hours. Women gather there with torn shirts, worn stockings, cracked mittens, and blankets weakened along the edges. The space is crowded. Elbows touch. Needles pass from hand to hand. A child winds thread around a piece of wood. Conversation moves softly beneath the canvas. They speak about the weather. They speak about husbands who refuse to admit they are tired. That final subject produces considerable agreement. Mending is not decorative. A patch strengthens cloth before the tear widens. Stockings are darned because exposed skin can freeze. Mittens are reinforced at the fingertips. Blanket edges are bound with strips cut from clothing too damaged to wear. Nothing useful is discarded. A worn petticoat becomes bandages. A damaged shawl becomes padding. A child's outgrown shirt becomes strips for tying bundles. Fabric is stored the way fuel is stored, with care and imagination. Washing creates another challenge. Clothing cannot be soaked freely because drying is difficult. Instead, the worst dirt is scrubbed from collars, cuffs, and cloth used by the sick. Water is heated in small amounts. Garments are wrung tightly and hung near the fire, watched constantly so they do not scorch or freeze. Steam rises from wool. The smell is not pleasant. No one comments. Standards of comfort have become flexible. Standards of cleanliness remain as strict as conditions allow. Women also manage emotion. A child wakes crying from a dream. A frightened teenager asks whether the snow will bury the wagon. An exhausted man returns from chopping wood and speaks harshly over nothing. The women absorb these moments, but not silently in every case. One wife tells her husband that the storm is difficult enough without him adding weather indoors. He stares at her. Then he laughs. The tension loosens. Gentle sarcasm has preserved many households, though it rarely appears in official records. By afternoon, a woman from another wagon arrives with news that an older traveller has stopped eating. Two women go to see her. They carry broth, a warm stone, and a comb. The comb seems unimportant until one of them begins untangling the older woman's hair. The slow motion calms her. She takes several spoonfuls of broth. Care often works through dignity. A washed face, a clean collar, hair smoothed back, a cup served properly rather than pushed into a hand. These gestures remind a sick person that she is still part of the human world, not merely another problem to be managed. The newborn's mother rests while others take turns holding the baby. Milk must be protected through warmth, food, and sleep. The women arrange duties around her. though every helper already has duties of her own. One rocks the infant while kneading dough, another watches the baby while mending, a third brings warm broth and firmly refuses thanks. The network is informal but strong. No rule creates it. Need does. Evening approaches before the work slows. Bread bakes near the coals. The smell moves through camp and draws children toward the fire. Quilts return to sleeping places. Cups are filled. The sick are checked again. Only after everyone else settles do the women prepare to rest. One removes her boots and rubs swollen feet. Another flexes fingers cramped from sewing. A third sits without moving, staring into the last light of the fire for a brief moment. Nobody asks anything of them. Then the baby stirs. A child whispers for water. The feverish traveller coughs. The women rise again. Their endurance is not loud. It does not arrive in a dramatic rescue or a heroic speech. It appears in the next bowl of broth, the next repaired mitten, the next calm answer given when fear returns. Outside, the snow presses against the wagons. Inside, women keep making life possible, one measured, repeated act at a time. The baby settles again, and beyond the wagon walls the steady scrape of wood against packed snow begins before sunrise. Men and older boys are opening the paths, and during the night, wind has filled yesterday's tracks almost completely. The route to the creek has narrowed to a shallow crease. The way toward the animals is hidden beneath a smooth drift. Even the space between neighbouring wagons has become uncertain. You step outside with a board held like a shovel. The cold reaches your lungs at once. Lantern light trembles across the snow. Figures move slowly through the grey, bending, lifting, pushing and stamping. Nobody speaks more than necessary. The work has a rhythm of its own. Scrape, lift, turn, breathe, then begin again. Proper shovels are scarce. Families use boards, frying pans, pieces of broken crate, and anything broad enough to move snow. A metal pan works well until the handle freezes against a mitten. A wooden board is clumsy, but it does not steal warmth from the hands quite so quickly. The first goal is not a road west, it is a safe camp. Paths must connect wagons, water, fires, animals, and the place where waste is carried away. A person should be able to follow them in poor light without stepping into a creek hole or wandering into deep snow. You work beside a man whose beard is white with frost. He pushes snow toward the edge of the path, then stamps the surface firm. The pack trail becomes darker and harder beneath your boots. A basic reality of winter travel is that breaking a path through deep snow can exhaust people and animals very quickly. The first person or team does the hardest work, while those behind benefit from the packed track for that reason. Workers rotate. One group cuts the path, another widens it, a third rests, drinks, and returns later. Pride is not useful if it leaves a person too tired to work tomorrow. Still, pride appears. One man refuses to stop when his shoulders begin to shake. Another tells him that falling face first into the drift will not improve the road. The remark earns a glare. Then, reluctantly, the tired man hands over the board. Hot water waits near the fire. He drinks in small swallows, staring at the path as if it has personally insulted him. Beyond camp, a scouting party prepares to test the trail. They carry rope, an axe, a lantern, food, and extra cloth. Their purpose is not to travel far. They must learn how deep the snow lies, whether the road crosses dangerous slopes, and whether any lower ground offers an escape. You join them at the edge of the cottonwoods. The camp disappears surprisingly fast behind you. Within a few dozen steps, the wagons blur into pale shapes. Wind moves powder across your tracks. The red cloth markers tied to branches become essential. One scout carries a long pole. He pushes it into the snow before each uncertain step. The pole reveals hidden hollows, buried rocks, and the edges of frozen drainage channels, where the surface looks smooth. The ground beneath may drop sharply. The men spread out only slightly. No one wishes to become a heroic missing person before breakfast. A lesser-known detail from trail practice is that travellers sometimes use branches, poles, cloth strips, or stacked stones to mark difficult routes in snow. Such signs could be the difference between returning safely and circling through an altered landscape. The trail climbs toward a low ridge. Snow reaches the scout's knees in places. Each step requires lifting the leg high, planting the foot, and testing the surface before transferring weight. Breathing grows louder. Sweat gathers beneath coats. This is dangerous because sweat will cool quickly once movement stops. The group slows. Scarves are loosened slightly. Coats open at the neck. No one rests long enough to become chilled. At the ridge, the view is discouraging. The western trail lies beneath wide drifts. Wind has piled snow along the slope in waves. A narrow ravine crosses the route, though its edges are difficult to see. One man studies the country ahead. Another kneels and digs through the snow to examine the ground. A third watches the sky. The question is not whether a person can walk through. A person can struggle across many places that a wagon cannot. The question is whether oxen can pull several thousand pounds without breaking through the crust, losing footing, or collapsing from effort. For now, the answer appears to be no. Researchers have long differed over how often trapped emigrants misjudge snow depth, because the visible surface concealed harder drifts, soft pockets, or hidden obstacles. Written accounts usually describe conditions after scouts' return. Not every uncertainty faced while they were away. You feel that uncertainty beneath your own feet. One step rests on firm crust. The next sinks suddenly to the thigh. The scout beside you grabs your arm before you fall. Together you pull free, leaving a dark hollow in the white surface. The group continues only far enough to confirm that movement would be reckless. Then the scouts turn back. Returning is harder than expected because wind has blurred the tracks already. The branch markers guide the way. At one point, the men stop and listen. Faintly, through the trees, comes the strike of an axe. Camp lies in that direction. The sound is ordinary and deeply reassuring. Back among the wagons, repair work has begun. Snow delay offers time, though not comfort. Axles are inspected. Wheel hubs are greased. Harness is dried and softened. Cracked boards are braced. You kneel beside a wheel while another man removes packed ice from the spokes. The wood has swollen with moisture. Iron rims contract in the cold. Every joint receives attention. A wagon that survives the storm may still fail on the first day of movement if damage goes unnoticed. Spare parts are limited. A broken spoke can be shaped from suitable wood. A cracked tongue may be bound with iron or rope. Leather straps can be patched. An axle is more difficult. Some families carry spare axle timber beneath the wagon bed, a heavy precaution that once seemed excessive and now looks almost inspired. A carpenter among the travellers becomes valuable. He studies a split board, runs his thumb along the grain, and selects a piece of hardwood from the supply pile. His tools are simple, but his eye is precise. The saw makes a dry rasping sound. Wood shavings curl onto the snow. They are collected for kindling, because even repair work must feed the fire. A somewhat peculiar custom in wagon companies was the tendency to assign informal titles based on useful skills. A man who repaired one wheel successfully might become the camp wheel expert, whether or not he had ever intended to hold such an office. Here, experience spreads quickly. One person understands harness, another sharpens tools, a third knows how to set a loose rim. Nobody works entirely alone. Repair also extends to footwear. Boot soles separate after weeks of mud and cold, leather cracks, nails loosen. A man sits near the fire, pushing a curved needle through thick hide while another holds the boot steady. The owner watches anxiously. He has only one good pair. Walking west without them would be unpleasant in a way that no soothing narration can fully improve. By afternoon, the scouts report to the camp leaders. The western slope is blocked. The ravine is dangerous. No wagon should attempt the route today. Some faces tighten at the news. Remaining still consumes food and fuel, yet the report also prevents disaster. Knowledge, even disappointing knowledge, is useful. The leaders consider another possibility. Could the company retreat east toward lower ground? The scouts saw heavy drifts there too, but the descent may be easier once snow settles. A second party will examine it tomorrow. No decision is made tonight. Instead, the camp prepares for several possibilities. Paths are kept open. Wagons are repaired. Harness is made ready. Animals rest. Supplies are arranged so movement can begin quickly if conditions improve. You return to the path before dusk. Wind has already softened its edges. You stamp it firm again. Following the line between wagons, lanterns begin to glow through canvas. The creek marker stands dark against the snow. The labour seems temporary. Tomorrow may erase it, still, you continue. Survival is often the willingness to repeat a necessary task, even when weather shows no respect for yesterday's effort. At the wagon entrance, you turn toward the hidden trail. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the road west remains beneath the snow. You cannot move along it yet, but every cleared path, repaired wheel, rested animal, and careful scout keeps the possibility alive. The path between the wagons is firm again by dusk, but the people walking along it carry more than buckets. Wood and news, they carry opinions. A snowbound camp may look quiet from a distance. Canvas roofs glow softly. Smoke rises between trees. Oxen stand together in the shelter of the wagons, inside that calm shape. However, every family is counting food, guarding children, watching animals, and wondering how much help can safely be given to others. Cooperation is necessary. So are boundaries. The difficulty lies in deciding where one ends and the other begins. You stand near the shared fire while several adults gather for the evening council. The wagon master rests one hand on a wooden crate. Others form a loose circle, shoulders hunched against the cold. The first question concerns flour. One family has more than expected. Another has almost none. A third claims its supply is low but refuses to say exactly how low. No one likes being asked to reveal the contents of a wagon. Supplies represent survival, but they also represent preparation. A family that packed carefully may resent supporting one that carried furniture instead of food. A family that lost provisions during a river crossing may feel unfairly judged for misfortune. The conversation remains polite for a while. One man suggests pooling all flour and distributing equal portions. Another refuses. A woman nearby asks whether equal portions make sense when one household has 2 people and another has 7. Someone proposes counting adults and children separately. Someone else asks how much a nursing mother should receive. The questions multiply faster than the flour. A notable feature of organized wagon travel is that companies often adopted written or spoken rules before departure. These could cover leadership, guard duty, road behavior, livestock, camp order, and the sharing of labor. Such agreements sound clear when signed in a settled town. They become less clear when snow traps everyone and hunger begins editing the meaning of fairness. The camp finally agrees that no family will be forced to surrender all private stores. Instead, each household will contribute a measured amount to a common reserve for emergencies. The reserve will support the sick, children without adequate food, and workers assigned to rescue or scouting tasks. 2 people will keep the count, not 1. Trust improves when arithmetic has witnesses. The shared food is placed in a wagon near the center of camp. The wagon belongs to an older couple with no young children and a reputation for careful record keeping. A small mark is made for every contribution. Another mark records every portion removed. This is not perfect. It is better than memory, especially when memory becomes mysteriously generous toward one's own family. Fuel creates a similar problem. Some households gathered large piles before the storm deepened. Others have little. Shared cooking saves wood. But families disagree about who should provide it. A rule is made. Anyone using the common fire contributes fuel or labor. A person's too weak to gather wood can carry water, prepare food, tend children, or perform another useful task. The rule matters because charity feels different when everyone contributes something. Dignity remains intact. Even a sick traveller can mend cloth or watch a kettle. A less expected detail from many migrating communities is that camp regulations sometimes included fines, assigned watches, or penalties for behaviour that endangered the group. A person who allowed animals to wander or ignored guard duty might be held responsible for losses. Here, coins are nearly useless as punishment. The camp uses labour. A man who leaves a gate rope unsecured must take an extra livestock watch. A boy who wanders beyond the markers spends the next morning gathering fuel beside an adult. The goal is not humiliation, it is prevention. One careless action can endanger everyone. Fire rules become especially strict. No open flame is allowed close to canvas. Children may not carry lanterns without supervision. Ashes must be checked before anyone sleeps. Smoking near stored hay or bedding is forbidden. A traveller complains that the rules are excessive. That evening, a spark lands on a wagon cover and is slapped out before it catches. The complaint does not return. Property remains another source of tension. Tools pass constantly between families. An axe goes to the wood-gathering party. A kettle moves to the shared fire. A needle travels through 3 wagons and vanishes. Its owner asks for it back. Nobody admits to having it. The camp searches pockets, sewing baskets, bedding, and crates with the gravity of people hunting buried treasure. At last, the needle appears in the cuff of a repaired shirt. The discovery produces relief far greater than the object's size would suggest. In a stranded camp, borrowing is essential, but loss can become serious. So tools are marked, recorded, or returned immediately after use. The carpenter scratches initials into the handles of shared axes. The cooks tie strips of cloth around kettle handles. Children are told exactly where borrowed objects belong. These systems seem fussy until someone needs a saw before dark. Researchers continue to dispute how often winter-bound wagon groups maintained formal discipline once ordinary travel stopped. Some records describe strong leadership and shared sacrifice. Others reveal factions, secret stores, accusations, and families acting almost entirely for themselves. This camp contains all of those possibilities. Most people cooperate most of the time. That is less dramatic than perfect unity and more believable. Arguments still flare. One begins when a family discovers tracks near its food chest. The father believes someone entered the wagon while they were away. A neighbour insists the marks belong to a dog. Voices rise. Children watch from behind the canvas flap. The wagon master examines the snow. The tracks are confused by drifting powder, and no clear answer appears. Without proof, no accusation can stand. The family is advised to secure its food more carefully. The suspected neighbour returns angrily to his own wagon. The matter is officially closed. Emotionally, it remains open. Trust is fragile because fear makes ordinary events look suspicious. A missing strip of bacon may have been stolen. It may also have been eaten earlier and forgotten. A lower flour sack may indicate secret use. It may simply have settled. The camp must resist turning every uncertainty into an enemy. Whispers still move between wagons. Some believe one household is hiding sugar. Others think a man has more cartridges than he admits. A woman is accused of favouring her relatives at the common pot. She responds by handing the serving spoon to her accuser. After one meal of measuring portions while 12 hungry people watch, the accuser quietly returns it. Leadership brings little comfort. The wagon master must settle disputes without becoming a tyrant. He cannot search wagons casually or seize supplies without risking open resistance. His authority depends on consent. People follow because they believe coordinated action improves survival. If that belief disappears, the title becomes only a name spoken near a fire. Women shape many decisions outside the formal council. They compare household stores, identify who is truly hungry, and know which families are too proud to ask for help. Children carry messages and overhear more than adults intend. Older men offer experience. Younger men provide strength. Every layer of the camp influences the rules, even when only a few voices speak publicly. One evening, a widow with 2 children is found cutting her own portion in half. She is not asked for help. The women near her notice. The common reserve sends flour and beans to her wagon without ceremony. The contribution is described as payment for the hours she has spent mending gloves. This explanation protects her pride. It also happens to be true. Cooperation often succeeds when it is framed as exchange rather than pity. Night watch duties are reorganized. Pairs will walk the camp in shifts. Each pair checks fires, animals, paths, and wagon covers. No person stands watch alone in the worst cold. A small bell hangs near the central wagon. 3 rings mean fire, 2 mean loose animals. Repeated ringing means everyone wakes. The system is simple enough to remember while half asleep. You take the middle watch with a quiet man from another wagon. For an hour, you walk the paths together. Lantern light moves over snowbanks. Ropes remain secure. Fires rest beneath ash. No alarm sounds. The man offers you a piece of dried apple from his pocket. He breaks it in 2. Neither portion is large. The gesture feels larger than the food. By dawn, the camp remains tired. suspicious in places, generous in others, and held together by rules everyone has agreed to obey for one more day. That may be the truest form of unity available. Not perfect trust, not endless harmony. Only the repeated decision to share the fire, return the axe, take your watch, and believe that survival is still a task performed together. Morning arrives with an unfamiliar sound. Water, not flowing loudly, not yet, but dripping. You hear it before you see it. Tiny drops fall from the lower edge of the canvas roof. Snow resting on a nearby branch slips away in a soft rush. Somewhere beyond the trees, a faint trickle reaches the creek. Nobody announces the change. People simply notice. Faces lift toward the pale sky. The air still bites the skin, yet it carries a different feeling. The sharp edge has softened. Sunlight lingers a little longer on the snow instead of disappearing behind thick clouds. Hope enters the camp quietly. Hope is welcome. Hope is also dangerous if it arrives too early. You step outside with a cup of warm broth. The path remains firm beneath your boots, but the top layer of snow has become damp. Every footprint leaves a clearer mark than yesterday. A scout kneels and presses a gloved hand against the surface. The snow compresses. He smiles slightly, not because the trail is open, because something has begun to change. One familiar reality of mountain weather is that warming conditions can create as many problems as intense cold. Snow softens, hidden streams awaken, and solid-looking ground may lose its strength within hours. The camp understands this. Nobody rushes to harness the oxen. Instead, everyone watches. Children are warned not to play near the creek. Ice that held firm yesterday may weaken today. Water moving beneath the frozen surface can hollow empty spaces that are impossible to see. A long branch is placed across the safest crossing. Only adults may step beyond it. The younger children accept this rule with impressive seriousness for almost 5 minutes. Then one remembers a forgotten stick near the bank. His older sister catches him before he reaches the edge. She does not scold loudly. She simply points toward the water where a thin crack has appeared beneath the ice. The lesson needs no further explanation. Nearby, several men inspect the wagons once more. Wheel rims are checked, harness straps are tightened, crates are tied securely. Everything that shifted during the long delay must be returned to travelling order. The wagon no longer feels like a house. It slowly becomes a vehicle again, inside. The family begins packing. Blankets are folded. Cooking pots are cleaned and stacked. Loose clothing disappears into chests. The little carved toy wagon is wrapped carefully in cloth and tucked beside a bundle of spare shoes. It has survived the storm. Its owner insists it deserved a proper place. Nobody argues. An interesting detail preserved in several trail accounts is that families often repack their wagons many times during the journey. Loads shifted, supplies diminished, and new priorities emerged after each difficult stretch of travel. Experience changes organization. Heavy items return near the bottom. Frequently used tools remain close to the entrance. Medicine stays where everyone can reach it. Food is counted once more. The flour sack feels lighter than anyone wishes. Beans remain. Salt remains. Coffee remains in a very small quantity. The sugar is nearly gone. Still, there is enough to continue. Outside, the oxen appear restless. For days they have stood, walked short circles, and searched patiently beneath the snow. Now they sniff the air. They toss their heads. Perhaps they sense change. Perhaps they are simply tired of standing in one place. Either explanation feels reasonable. A pair of men lead them toward an open patch where the sun has exposed dry grass. The animals lower their heads eagerly. Every mouthful matters. The women prepare a larger meal than usual, not because supplies have increased, because tomorrow may demand hard travel. Extra strength today may become necessary tomorrow. Broth simmers. Flatbread warms beside the fire. A little bacon is divided carefully. The smell drifts through camp and encourages even the weakest travellers to sit upright. One established observation from emigrant journals is that food carried emotional weight beyond simple nutrition. A warm meal marked celebration, recovery, or preparation, just as clearly as it filled empty stomachs. Conversation grows livelier. People begin speaking about places beyond the snow, the next river, the next fort, the valleys farther west. Children ask whether flowers will appear soon. An older man answers that spring always keeps people waiting slightly longer than they expect. Everyone laughs because it feels true after breakfast. The scouts leave once more. This time the camp waits with quieter confidence. The wind has fallen. Sunlight reaches farther into the trees. Drops continue falling from branches. Hours pass. People continue working because waiting is easier when hands remain occupied. Boots are brushed clean, ropes are coiled. Firewood is stacked for whoever departs last. The sick traveller sits outside for the first time in many days, wrapped in blankets with face turned toward the sun. The warmth is gentle, even so. It feels extraordinary nearby. The newborn sleeps peacefully. The mother walks a few careful steps beyond the wagon and breathes deeply. Fresh air fills her lungs. She smiles without saying anything. Sometimes relief has no words. The scouts finally return during the afternoon. Snow still covers the western trail. However, the upper crust has settled. The dangerous drift near the ridge is shortened. The ravine remains difficult, but another route curves through lower ground. It is longer. It appears safer. No immediate departure. No permanent imprisonment. Something between the two. The camp gathers to hear every detail. Questions come quickly. Can the wagons climb? Will the oxen manage how much snow remains? How long will the crossing require? The scouts answer patiently. Nothing is guaranteed. The route deserves another day of warming. If conditions continue improving, movement may begin tomorrow morning. The news spreads from wagon to wagon like sunlight reaching shaded ground. Nobody cheers wildly. Experienced travellers understand that weather enjoys changing its mind. Still, people begin preparing with greater purpose. Water containers are filled, ashes are scattered safely, unused firewood is bundled. The common food reserve is measured and divided fairly among the families once more. Every household receives its portion. The record keeper scratches the final marks into the wooden tally board. Its work is almost finished. Researchers continue discussing how quickly wagon companies resume movement after severe snowstorms because conditions varied enormously from one valley to another. Some groups departed as soon as a narrow track appeared, while others remained several extra days to avoid exhausting animals or risking broken wagons. This company chooses patience. One more night, one more careful inspection, one more chance for the ground to strengthen. As evening approaches, camp begins changing in subtle ways. Objects that rested outside for many days disappear into wagons. Temporary wind barriers are taken down. Extra poles are untied. The common sewing place becomes an ordinary wagon again. Children run a little farther than they have all week before being called back. Their laughter carries through the trees. Even the dogs seem more energetic. Perhaps they smell moving animals. Perhaps they simply appreciate that fewer people look worried. You stand near the edge of camp where the path meets untouched snow. The footprints from yesterday are softer now. Water glitters beneath the surface. The sky holds streaks of pale gold above the trees. Behind you, smoke rises gently from the evening fires. Ahead, somewhere beyond the ridges, the long road still waits. It has not disappeared, it has only paused. Tonight, families finish their final preparations beneath familiar canvas roofs. They fold quilts that became walls against winter. They store cups that carried countless servings of broth. They thank neighbours for borrowed tools, shared food, patient care, and quiet companionship through the hardest days. The camp settles for sleep with lighter hearts than it has known for many nights. No one claims victory. No one believes every danger has passed. Yet beneath the steady dripping from the melting branches, one thought moves through every wagon. Tomorrow may finally carry them forward again. Before the first hint of dawn reaches the trees, the camp is already awake. No bell rings. No voice calls everyone together. The sound of quiet preparation spreads naturally from wagon to wagon. A lantern glows beneath one canvas cover. Another appears farther along the line. Boots press fresh prints into the damp snow where yesterday only hard ice remained. You pull on stiff clothing that has rested beside the fire through the night. The fabric feels warmer than it did a week ago, though perhaps that is only because hope has a remarkable way of improving the temperature. Outside, the air is still cold. It simply no longer feels determined to defeat every living creature it meets. The fire is stirred back to life one final time. Breakfast is simple. Warm porridge, a little bread. The last careful servings from yesterday's broth. Nobody lingers over the meal. Every minute of daylight may become valuable if the company is finally able to travel. The oxen receive extra attention. Their shoulders are brushed clean. Harness is examined buckle by buckle. Leather that remained near the fire overnight bends more easily than frozen straps. Knots are retied. Ropes are inspected once again. An established observation from many trail journals is that emigrants often delayed departure until every wagon could move safely. One damaged team could slow an entire company, making careful preparation far more efficient than hurried travel. That wisdom guides every movement this morning. The carpenter checks one repaired wheel. The blacksmith examines an iron fitting that loosened during the storm. Women secure cooking pots with strips of cloth so they will not rattle loose across rough ground. Children gather the last scattered belongings that somehow escaped yesterday's packing. A mitten appears beneath a crate. A wooden spoon is discovered beside the fire. The carved toy wagon is tucked safely inside its bundle after receiving one final inspection from its proud owner. Nothing important is left behind willingly. The common reserve wagon opens for the last time. Measured portions are handed to each family. No arguments interrupt the distribution. The system that seemed uncertain when it began has carried everyone through the worst days. The older couple responsible for the records close the wooden lid and exchange a quiet smile. Their careful counting has reached its conclusion. Nearby, the nursing mother thanks several women who helped during the birth. The words are brief. The meaning behind them is enormous. Hands are squeezed, shoulders touched gently. Promises are made to visit one another if their paths remain together farther west. Not every friendship formed during hardship lasts forever. Many do. A curious detail preserved in several emigrant memories is that wagon companies often became extended families during difficult stretches of the journey. Shared danger created bonds that could remain strong long after the trail itself had ended. The scouts leave before sunrise for one final inspection. Everyone watches them disappear through the trees. Waiting returns once more. Yet today's waiting feels different. People continue working instead of staring toward the ridge. Children help fold the temporary snow markers collected from around camp. The bright strips of cloth are untied from branches and packed away. Their purpose has ended. The paths between wagons begin disappearing naturally beneath boots and melting snow. Soon there will be no camp to connect, only the road ahead. The scouts return sooner than expected. Their expressions answer the question before a single word is spoken. The route is passable, slowly, carefully, but passable. No cheer breaks the morning silence. Instead, a deep breath seems to pass through the entire company at once. People immediately begin moving. Oxen are brought into position. Yokes are lowered. Chains are fastened. Children climb into wagons while older boys walk beside the teams. Drivers gather the reins. One family pauses beside the place where the newborn entered the world only days before. Another looks toward the wagon where the feverish traveller now sits upright beneath folded blankets. The camp has changed every person within it. The wagon master walks the line one final time. He asks each driver the same simple question. Ready. Sometimes the answer is spoken. Sometimes it arrives as a nod. Sometimes only a steady hand resting on the oxen's neck is enough. The first team leans into the yoke. Nothing happens. The wheels remain still. Then the animals gather themselves once more. Wood creaks. Leather tightens. The wagon shifts forward by the smallest distance imaginable. Another step follows. The wheels begin turning. Snow compresses beneath the iron rims. The long pause is instant. You walk beside the wagon rather than riding inside. Many emigrants choose to save the animals from unnecessary weight whenever possible. Walking also allows quicker reaction if a wheel slips or an animal struggles. The trail leaves the sheltering trees, sunlight touches the open slope, snow still covers much of the ground. But yesterday's hard drifts have softened enough for careful travel. Each wagon follows the track opened by the scouts. Nobody attempts shortcuts. The company stretches into a slow-moving line. The pace is patient. Every hill receives full attention. Every hollow is examined before the first wheel enters it. One remarkable feature of experienced wagon travel was the willingness to sacrifice speed for safety. A delayed arrival was preferable to a broken axle or an exhausted team many miles from assistance. The first difficult place appears near the shallow ravine. The scouts position themselves along the crossing. One guides the lead oxen. Another watches the rear wheels. Ropes stand ready if help becomes necessary. The lead wagon enters carefully. For a long moment, everyone watches without breathing very much. The wheels sink slightly. Then they climb the opposite side. The crossing succeeds. The next wagon follows. Confidence grows, though caution remains. Not every challenge disappears. One ox slips on damp ground but regains its footing almost immediately. A wheel throws wet snow across a driver's coat. Someone laughs quietly when a determined goose, apparently offended by the entire migration, marches across the trail as though conducting an inspection. Even the birds seem prepared to express opinions. The company continues west. Behind you, smoke from the abandoned camp fades into the morning sky. Soon only faint marks remain where the wagons once stood. Snow begins settling into the empty spaces. Nature wastes little time reclaiming temporary homes. Researchers continue examining how snowbound camps influence later travel decisions. Many surviving accounts suggest that families became more cautious after enduring severe winter weather, choosing campsites with greater care and paying closer attention to changing skies. The lessons learned here will travel with every wagon. Children who carried water through deep snow will remember. Parents who counted each handful of flour will remember. Drivers who watched exhausted oxen struggle against frozen drifts will remember. The memory becomes another piece of equipment, packed without occupying any space. As afternoon approaches, the landscape slowly changes. Patches of dark earth appear beneath the melting snow. Tiny streams cross the trail. The sound of running water grows stronger. A hawk circles high overhead. Its broad wings hardly move. The sight draws several faces upward. For days the sky seemed occupied only by clouds. Now it feels open again. You glance back one final time. The grove where the wagons waited is almost hidden by distance. From here it appears peaceful. No one looking at those quiet trees would guess how many anxious nights, whispered conversations, shared meals, careful acts of kindness, and determined hopes fill that place. Yet every traveller knows the camp will remain long after the snow itself has vanished, not on the ground, inside memory, and memory, unlike snow, travels west with every step. The wagons continue west at their careful pace, leaving behind the quiet grove that sheltered so many uncertain days. The wheels no longer fight deep drifts with every turn. Instead, they roll across ground where winter is slowly loosening its grip. Patches of brown earth appear beside the trail. Water trickles beneath thinning snow. Small birds return to branches that seemed empty only yesterday. You walk beside the familiar wagon and glance toward the canvas cover. Only a short time ago it was a tiny world that held every hope, every fear, every meal, every whispered conversation, every restless night, and every determined plan. Now it becomes a travelling home once again. The space inside feels different. The fever has passed. The newborn sleeps peacefully. The quilts are folded neatly instead of hanging as barriers against the cold. The cooking pot rests securely in its place. The little carved wagon remains tucked safely beside the family chest, ready to remind its owner that even difficult days can become stories. The people have changed as much as the wagon. They move with greater confidence, not because they believe every danger has disappeared, because they have already survived one they once feared might never end. A familiar truth from many emigrant accounts is that hardship often strengthens practical knowledge. Each difficult crossing, harsh storm, illness, or shortage taught lessons that shaped later decisions along the trail. Those lessons cannot be purchased. They can only be lived. You notice small differences everywhere. The camp now stops earlier when clouds gather. Firewood is collected before anyone grows tired. Water is stored before evening. Harness is checked twice instead of once. Children stay closer without constant reminders. No one complains about these habits. Everyone understands why they exist. The road stretches ahead through open country. It still contains rivers, mountains, dust, mud, broken wheels, unexpected storms, long days, short meals, countless miles. Yet each traveller now carries quiet evidence that frightening moments eventually become memories. During the midday halt, the families prepare another simple meal. This time nobody eats inside a sealed wagon. People sit beneath the open sky. Sunlight warms tired faces. Steam rises from cups into clear air. The oxen graze peacefully nearby. Even the dogs seem unusually relaxed, as though they too appreciate dry ground beneath their paws. Conversation wanders easily. Someone remembers the night when the fire nearly went out. Another laughs about the missing sewing needle that caused such concern. A child proudly retells the story of carrying warm water without spilling a drop. Each memory has already softened around the edges. Fear slowly transforms into shared history. One charming detail preserved in several family recollections is that stories from difficult moments were often repeated for years afterward, especially around family tables and winter fires. The frightening parts gradually became balanced by humour, gratitude, and admiration for neighbours who helped one another. Perhaps that process has already begun. One man imitates the stubborn expression of an ox that refused to move. Another exaggerates the size of the snowdrifts until they sound taller than houses. Everyone knows the stories have grown slightly larger. Nobody minds. Good stories often travel farther than exact measurements. The newborn wakes briefly. Sunlight reaches tiny hands wrapped inside soft cloth. Several women smile. The child will never remember the snowbound camp. Others will remember it for the child. That is one of the quiet gifts carried by families. Memory is shared until it becomes part of everyone. The afternoon journey continues beneath broad skies. Fresh water sparkles beside the trail. Wild grasses begin showing faint hints of green beneath melting snow. The landscape slowly exchanges winter for spring, one careful step at a time. You breathe deeply. The air smells different now. Less smoke, more earth, more water, more growing things hidden beneath the soil. The journey is still demanding. Boots remain worn. Food remains limited. Muscles remain tired. Yet hope now walks openly beside the wagons instead of hiding inside whispered conversations. Researchers continue comparing personal diaries from different wagon companies, because no two journeys unfolded in exactly the same way. Weather, leadership, health, timing, and simple fortune shaped every experience differently. Some families escaped severe storms. Others endured weeks of hardship. Together their accounts reveal not one single Oregon Trail story, but thousands of individual journeys connected by determination. This family becomes one small part of that larger picture. Not famous, not extraordinary, simply human. Parents trying to protect children, children learning courage without realizing it. Neighbors sharing work because survival rarely belongs to one person alone. Animals carrying burdens they never chose. Ordinary people meeting extraordinary circumstances with ordinary acts repeated faithfully each day. As evening approaches, the wagons stop beside another gentle stream. Camp is made quickly now. Everyone remembers their place. The fires burn steadily. Bread bakes. Water boils. The oxen settle peacefully after grazing. Children gather smooth stones instead of frozen branches. The sky glows with soft colours above the western horizon. There will be more miles tomorrow. There always are. Yet tonight feels wonderfully ordinary, and after everything that has happened. Ordinary is a remarkable comfort. Now, as the evening grows quieter, you allow the memory of the snowbound wagon to drift gently behind you. You remember the careful hands wrapping blankets against the cold, the patient tending of tiny fires, the measured handfuls of flour, the shared tools, the whispered encouragement, the newborn cry breaking the silence. the steady footsteps of scouts returning through white forests, the first drops of melting snow falling from the branches, the slow turning of wheels that finally carried everyone forward again. None of those moments seemed grand while they were happening. They were simply the next necessary thing. A cup offered, a quilt adjusted, a path cleared, a frightened child comforted, a neighbour helped. Yet those quiet actions, repeated again and again, became the reason the journey continued. So now you let the trail grow softer in your thoughts. The wheels turn more slowly, the voices become distant, the evening fire settles into glowing embers, the oxen breathe peacefully beyond the wagon, the creek flows with its gentle song. Above everything, the wide western sky stretches without hurry, calm and endless. You no longer need to count supplies, watch the weather, or listen for the sound of approaching wind. The families have found their rhythm again. The road continues safely into tomorrow, for tonight you simply rest beside them, warmed by the memory of quiet courage and patient kindness. The lantern grows dimmer, the stars become brighter, the trail fades into peaceful silence. And with that gentle silence surrounding every wagon, every traveller, and every hopeful dream carried toward the western horizon, it is finally time to close your eyes and let sleep complete the journey.